Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 431. Cooked Duck. God by she kept staring at Qin Mu, who cautious and conscientious, attaching the other's leg seriously without any complaint. He sutured the root of the leg with the leg chosen by the god. Senior brother by she is not a human, right? Qin Mu examined the nerves and activated the nerve system of the broken section, nursing it with medicine. I see the structure of your body is different that of humans. What is your race? Light poured out from the heart of God by she's brows, and a primordial spirit soared out. It was a dragon horse which had wings on its back and a long horn on its head. Its mane fluttered in the wind as its body shone from its snow-white color. The dragon horse was lively and full of enthusiasm, truly having the vitality attributed to its name-bearers. Qin Mu raised his head to take a look before praising, "You are a divine steed. This kind of primordial spirit is rare. Using the term divine steed to describe me is also according to the times." God by she's primordial spirit stared at his actions. However, I rarely show my true form. During founding emperor, cough, cough. In the past, of course, before you were born, divine steeds like me could only deliver letters to people and be their mounts. It was truly a waste of our talents. Qin Mu's expression changed slightly and he asked, "In that case, how did senior brother by she go to high heavens?" The god sighed. "The heaven changed, the earth changed, even lowly gods like my kind received our day to shine. Not long after the calamity, I surrendered. After that, great ruins appeared. Back then, many of those who had surrendered with me shone brighter and were all better at currying favor than me. So they left this world to enjoy their lives, leaving only a few of us behind. Those fellows were all good at bootlicking, but I was not. It was fine anyway, though. Better be a chicken's beak than a cow's rump." He smiled. Even though those fellows knew how to bootlick, the moment they reached the upper realm, they became the lowest of the low there. Because of that, they are worse off than us who stay at the lower realm, riding roughshod over people and staying high up at the top, enjoying people's worship and sacrifices. "Yet, you are still no more than a runner until now," Qin Mu said with a smile. God by she was furious and his god's aura burst forth. "What did you say?" Qin Mu smiled. "Don't get agitated and make me connect the wrong nerve, or you'll be limping even after I attach your leg back." God by she sighed. "You are right. I'm indeed a runner. I had run to deliver letters in the past and I'm now running to bring disaster to this land. All the dirty works are thrown at me, and I'm even dirtier than I was in the past. But it can't be helped. If I don't do what they ask, it will be hard for me to escape death. How strong are the four sovereigns of high heavens. Their abilities are greater than mine, but they can still only be runners. Not only that, we also have to risk our lives. Who can say how many of us will make it through this?" His eyes narrowed from worry. Up till then, the other meteorological weapons had not been activated. It meant that Star Sovereign Xiao and the rest were most likely dead. "If you were to surrender to me, I could make you a mountain god and you enjoy your sacrifices. Why don't you be a mountain god beside Surging River so you can accompany dragon-rearing sovereign? All the people who hang themselves on the mountain and jump off the cliffs would be your food. I have a good place. There's a mountain beside Deer County called 100 Years Mountain. The scenery is beautiful and the mountain is over 300,000 feet tall. If you became a mountain god there, it wouldn't be an insult to you." "Bah!" God by she smiled at him. "I'm not a shameless person like dragon-rearing sovereign. I've already surrendered once, so how can I surrender again? Do I still want my face? What's more, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat humans. I had wanted to be a mountain god in the past, but it was a pity I was too fast, so I had to deliver letters as a runner. If I had run slightly slower, I might have just landed myself an official position." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This is your abilities being detrimental to you." God by she smiled. "You are quite a good person and also kind. I admire you very much. After you attach my leg, we can sit down for a talk. Even if Eternal Peace Empire is wiped out, you can follow me to high heavens. I can't promise anything, but I can at least protect you and your whole family. Qin Mu gave his thanks. It's good to leave a way out for myself too. I've long wanted to go to high heavens, but I don't have divine incense, so I can't contact them. As he said that, there was a sudden tremor as 5 demons with green faces and tusks appeared around Fragrance Well. They whirled around 5 Thunder Pot and it vanished into thin air. God Baishi's primordial spirit stretched out to grab it, but he grabbed nothing. He only managed to grab one of the demons while roaring in anger. Thunder rumbled and the entire purple chased city shook violently. Behind Qin Mu, the divine flood dragon king roared and revealed his true form, coiling around the courtyard of Fragrance Well. He stared at the primordial spirit of his enemy. God Baishi crushed the huge demon and immediately summoned his primordial spirit back. The moment it entered his body, he instantly felt evil chi pouring out from his wounded leg, invading all parts of his body, wandering between his primordial spirit and divine treasures. His blood couldn't help running cold as he hurried to execute his magic power to suppress it. Crap! After all that guarding, I still didn't manage to protect myself. The divine flood dragon king took the chance to pounce on him, and his body locked God Baishi tightly, making him unable to move. The grip was so tight that veins were bursting out on his forehead. Qin Mu stood up and pulled out Carefree sword to throw it on the ground. Smiling, he said, "Senior brother Baishi, the ducks I cook can never fly away. Take the sword, you can cut off the poison parts yourself. Divine Flood Dragon King, let him go. When I cook ducks, I like them to cut themselves in pieces without my help. Now that you've been poisoned by me, senior brother Baishi, you can only sever yourself from the neck down. Nothing below it can be kept." The divine Flood Dragon King hesitated for a moment, but still let go. God Baishi roared loudly and his god's aura rolled out in waves, exploding the pot of medicinal liquid. He walked toward Qin Mu with his murderous intent overflowing into the sky. The divine Flood Dragon King was extremely nervous. He was about to make a move when God Baishi suddenly dispersed his god's aura and knelt down on one knee with a sigh. "I've already surrendered once in the past, so what if I surrender again? I'm willing to submit." Qin Mu smiled at him. "Don't worry, the scenery at 100 Years Mountain is very nice, and you are very suitable to stay there. Make an oath to Earth Count. Once you do it, I'll let you be the mountain god of 100 Years Mountain, and you'll be able to enjoy your sacrifices." After half a day, God Baishi's face was very dark. He had ridden the wind and clouds to hurry to Deer County, which was beside Surging River, with a frown. All around Deer County were barren hills of 3,000 feet and wild rivers. Where was the 300,000 feet mountain with beautiful scenery? God Baishi descended to the ground and asked a farmer, "Where's 100 Years Mountain?" "That's the one." God Baishi followed the direction of his finger and saw that 100 Years Mountain was actually a small hill which was saturated with the atmosphere of death. At the sight of it, he couldn't help shouting angrily, "That place is clearly a burial mound, a place to bury corpses. Why is it called 100 Years Mountain?" The farmer smiled at him. "What happens to an ordinary person after 100 years? Of course, it's death. Therefore, it's named 100 Years Mountain. Everyone is buried there after reached 100 years. God Baishi was stunned, not understanding. "Isn't 100 Years Mountain supposed to be 300,000 feet high? You fool with the horn." The farmer couldn't resist himself as he scolded him. "When a dead person lies down, they are merely a few inches high. So to a dead person, isn't 100 Years Mountain 300,000 feet high?" God Baishi was furious and flew to 100 Years Mountain angrily. "Damn you, Qin brat." Suddenly, Surging River split apart and a huge head popped out from the center of the river, sizing him up curiously while laughing. "I was thinking who had such an aura of a god, and I see it's Tao friend Baishi. Why are you here as well? You were just cursing Qin brat. So what happened?" "So it's Dragon Rearing Sovereign." God Baishi hurriedly greeted him while standing on the mountain peak. "I came to bring disaster to eternal peace, but I met Heavenly Devil Cult Master. There's no need for you to explain anymore. I get it." The huge dragon in the center of the river shook his body and changed into the human-shaped Dragon Rearing Sovereign. He said with a solemn face, He has a very honest face and looks easy to bully, right? How did you know? God Baishi asked him with a strange look. Dragon Rearing Sovereign stamped his feet. Because of his honest-looking face, I became Surging River Dragon King. This is easy. I have some. God Baishi's gaze flickered as he said, as long as you treat my injuries and let me successfully call on this disaster, I'll bring you to high heavens. Qin Mu scattered some powder on the broken section of the leg and saw nerves growing rapidly, waving their tentacles like earthworms. I had planned to sign the Pact of Earth Count with you to prevent you from bringing the disaster, yet you advise me to surrender. Senior brother, after your leg is attached, let us sign the Pact of Earth Count immediately. You can't go back on your word this time. God Baishi looked at his hand techniques and saw his fingers moving up and down quickly. The speed of his fingers was too much for the eyes to take in, yet they moved exquisitely, as though he was threading a needle and also manipulating the needle for the art of healing. You've learned sewing before? Your hands move like those of a tailor, the god said in bewilderment. Somewhat. Qin Mu's vital qi transformed into thread and connected the nerves. I have learned it for a few years. God Baishi was curious. What else have you learned? Qin Mu's fingers moved faster and faster as he spoke. Formation skills, fist skills, pupil skills, knife skills, body techniques, forging, painting and calligraphy, carpentry, poems and songs. I know a little about all of them. The nerves in God Baishi's broken leg connected with the divine leg, and he could instantly feel it, which filled him with delighted surprise. He took a glance at Qin Mu and thought to himself, this brat's abilities ain't bad and his heart isn't bad as well. I really don't want to kill him just like this. What a pity. Qin Mu went to connect his blood vessels and used the dragon Qilance dragon saliva to grow the flesh and blood. The bone marrow has still not fused. This part is the most difficult. Senior brother, bone marrow is used for creating blood and its impact is extremely large. I need to first cultivate it with medicine, then nourish it so it would be able to produce blood. Now, after your bone marrow starts working, you and I shall sign the Pact of Earth Count. You won't call upon the disaster and I will let you return to high heavens. God Baishi examined all the herbs, ensuring the youth didn't play any tricks, then smiled. Not a problem. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and ordered people to bring in a huge pot. After soaking the herbs in the water, he had people to light a fire and said, in about 2 days, the bone marrow will be able to start producing blood again. Move the huge pot closer. My hand can't leave 5 thunder pot. God Baishi immediately said. Qin Mu smiled at him. Senior brother Baishi sure does things seamlessly. Are you still scared I will do anything? The pot is right here and you know I can't move it. If your hand is always on 5 thunder pot, I'm scared you may accidentally activate it. God Baishi looked at him and their gazes locked onto each other. Qin Mu didn't back down. God Baishi felt refreshed and full of vigor. He laughed loudly and said, fine, as you wish. Qin Mu sat down nearby and waited quietly. The divine flood dragon king guarded him by the side. God Baishi's primordial spirit guarded the sky, prepared to activate 5 thunder pot anytime while he soaked in the pot, slowly feeling the medicinal energy seeping into his wounded leg, nourishing his flesh. The medicinal energy gradually reached his bones, bringing life to his bone marrow. Comfortable. God Baishi was utterly bored, so he asked for fun. Is Cult Master Qin married? I'm married. Qin Mu fetched a sundial and observed the time. The sundial had many marked scales and was very detailed. I married twice. What a pity. I planned to introduce a few beauties of my race when you came to high heavens. God Baishi chuckled. Your kids would have been half human and half horse. Just thinking about it makes me want to laugh. Ha 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 ha. Qin Mu didn't reply to him and continued to look at the sundial. God Baishi seemed to be in a good mood and kept talking nonsense, laughing from time to time. He seemed to be very pleased with himself. Without his notice, a day and a half passed while God Baishi's laughter grew louder and louder. His gaze towards Qin Mu was also becoming more and more unpleasant. Cult Master Qin, let me tell you a joke. In the past, there was a person who decided to cook a duck. When it was cooked and he was about to eat it, the duck flew away. Ha 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 ha. Why aren't you laughing? Let me tell you another joke. That cooked duck flew back later on and ate that idiot. Ha 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 ha. Qin Mu remained motionless and continued to stare at the sundial. She looked at him fiercely and sneered. You don't laugh and you don't talk. Are you discriminating against me? You are discriminating against me. I'm going to kill you. Qin Mu raised his head and smiled. Time's out, action. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 432, Invasion of the Strange. One god stood on the river and the other stood on 100 Years Mountain, looking speechlessly at each other in dismay. The river breeze whistled and the mountain wind howled. In early spring, both of them were bone-chilling. After a moment, dragon-rearing sovereign gradually sunk into the water as he said, Tidy your 100 Years Mountain first, then build a mountain god temple. I will hold a banquet later to welcome you. Your mountain is too quiet. People will only go there during Pure Brightness Festival or Ghost Festival. The incense is very little. If you can't survive on it, I'll share some with you. She felt desolate. Dragon-rearing sovereign ate meat, so what he would share with him would also be people who had committed suicide in the river. Yet he was a vegetarian who had no fruit or trees on his mountain. There were quite a number of corpses, though. I think I should first construct a temple. Once it is done, there might be believers who will bring me some fruits when they come to offer incense. As long as they are not spoiled, I can eat them. In Purple Chase City, Qin Mu looked at the 15 yards tall 5-thunder pot in front of him and his head started to ache slightly. Such a huge bottle gourd contained energy to wipe out the world. If the 5 great thunderclouds were accidentally released, it would be a huge disaster which would wipe the world. Cult Master, what about this 5-thunder pot? Should we hide it? Everyone in Heavenly Devil Cult surrounded this bottle gourd and examined it, their hearts filled with terror. Qin Mu shook his head. This bottle gourd isn't safe anywhere. Any carelessness and the power inside will be activated. The heavenly lightning will strike, killing I don't know how many people. He circled around the bottle gourd, finding it a thorny problem. The worst part was that Eternal Peace Empire didn't simply have a 5-thunder pot. There were over a dozen more meteorological weapons like it which could destroy Eternal Peace Empire 10 times over. Qin Mu suddenly flicked a finger against 5-thunder pot, and everyone felt their hair stand on ends. In an instant, heavenly thunderclouds gathered over an area of dozens of yards, and 5 directions divine lightning struck down. After the wave of lightning, everyone was charred on the outside and their faces were black like charcoal. The courtyard in which they had been standing was destroyed by lightning in its entirety. In an instant, 1,000 bolts of lightning had struck down and the buildings collapsed, and even the land had melted. Qin Mu spewed out a mouthful of black smoke while pondering over it. This thing is not bad for tempering the corporeal body. Borrowing the power of the 5 great thunderclouds to cultivate can allow one to quickly cultivate the corporeal body. Let us carry it back home, back to the sacred cult. Cult Master! Everyone's expressions changed drastically. An elder Sea Gong nearly cried out. If we carried it back to the sacred cult, it would be finished if the gourd accidentally exploded. Qin Mu was troubled. If this treasure can't be used by the sacred cult, won't it be wasted? Not at all, not at all, Elder Sea Gong immediately said. Qin Mu frowned and sighed ruefully. This thing has many uses yet you guys don't know how good it is. Oh well, I'll just keep it. You guys can transfer it into my true dragon's nest. I have a use for it. Everyone looked at one another in dismay. 5-thunder pot was clearly an extremely dangerous thing, so how was it useful? It was clearly a ticking time bomb that could take one's life any time. If he put it in the dragon's nest, lightning would be unable to discharge in such a huge space. So if the power of 5-thunder pot burst forth, even gods would be struck to death by the 5 great thunderclouds. Other than using 5-thunder pot to refine the body, it can also be used to wipe out a sect. If I meet anyone I can't defeat, I can just give it a slap and drag them down with me. Qin Mu thought to himself. Everyone worked together to execute 5 demons transfer technique, sending 5-thunder pot into the true dragon's nest. As they did, not one of them considered that their cult master might have such a dangerous idea. Qin Mu thanked everyone and summoned the divine flood dragon king and the dragon Qilin. They were about to hurry to God-broken mountain range to check on the situation when xianxia said, "Cult Master, the Emperor is currently on his way here and will reach Purple Chase City in 7 days. Aren't you going to wait for him?" Qin Mu stared at her with his eyes wide open. He cried out, "You didn't tell him not to come?" Xianxia shook her head. "You only said there's no need to wait for him and didn't say to tell him to turn back. The Emperor is driving Sunshot Divine Cannon over, and the exhaustion of medicinal stones is staggering as they hurry over with desperation." Qin Mu's scalp crawled, and he could almost see Emperor Yanfeng sharpening his knife in preparation to chop off his head. "Quickly inform him that he doesn't have to come anymore." Qin Mu turned and jumped on the back of the divine flood dragon king. "The Emperor won't execute you, but he will definitely dare to execute me," Xianxia immediately complained. "Don't you know how to praise a bad thing?" Qin Mu rode the dragon into the distance, and his voice came from afar. "Change the way to break the news to him, and he will even reward you." Praise a bad thing? Xianxia was first stunned, then came to a realization. She immediately asked Elder Si Gong to bring her to find Emperor Yanfeng, who was on the cannon battery with the civil and military officials following him. They were surrounded by imperial guards that had an awe-inspiring presence. The 56 furnaces on the huge cannon burned non-stop, using up countless medicinal stones. They were still hurrying to Purple Chase City. When Xianxia reached them, Emperor Yanfeng was ordering his people to fetch the medicinal stones from the city in front of them. The medicinal stones on the cannon battery had long run out, so he could only replenish them from the cities on the way. "Congratulations, Your Majesty!" Xianxia came forth to report. "God by Shi of high heavens remembered Your Majesty's broad and powerful might, so he didn't dare to create a ruckus and submitted. Now, he will belong to eternal peace and be the mountain god of Deer County's 100 Years Mountain. He will guard Your Majesty's empire so it would last through the ages." Emperor Yanfeng was pleased when he looked around at the civil and military officials on his left and right while laughing loudly. That rebellious god Bai Shi actually knew when to fall back. He knew that I'm coming personally and he wouldn't be a match for me, so he might as well surrender. This is truly making me punch the air. How would he dare to offend Your Majesty's heavenly might? He could only surrender or else he would die a miserable death, Lord Yan immediately said. All the ministers congratulated Emperor Yanfeng, and he smiled from ear to ear. "All of you have followed me, so you gain the credit as well. Everyone will be rewarded." All the ministers were delighted. After the commotion, Sunshot Divine Cannon stopped for a moment as they prepared to return to the capital. Emperor Yanfeng summoned Xianxia then, his face instantly sinking. He sneered at her. "Little saintess of Sea family, your cult master told you to say that? Why doesn't he dare to come to meet me?" Cult master used Human Emperor's seal to summon the heroes from all parts of the country to defend against the invasion of high heavens, holding them outside God-broken mountain range, preventing the enemies from invading, protecting the safety of eternal peace. All right, no need to talk officiously," Emperor Yanfeng sighed. "I know he put in much effort and has high achievements. It's also because of him this time that eternal peace wasn't wiped out and all of its people killed. I don't have any intention to blame him. Furthermore, he also saved my face by letting you come here." How did he subdue Bai Shi of high heavens? By making threats and promises, showing the enemy he's weak, using hundreds of different methods. Xianxia told him how Qin Mu had subdued God Bai Shi, and Emperor Yanfeng was stunned. Minister Qin helped Eternal Peace subdue 2 gods at such a young age, forcing them to guard mountains and rivers. With these kinds of things, even I am inferior. I was worried about the battle at God-broken mountain range, so I had ordered people to head to investigate, and there is already news. Xianxia's heart tightened when Emperor Yanfeng said, "General of the Borders said that there are continuous earthquakes along some 20,000 miles of God-broken mountain range. All the mountains had sunk, and the earthquakes have raised fog and darkness which is invading the God-broken mountains. Ghost gods can be seen in the fog, but no traces of Imperial Preceptor and the rest could be found. I want to go over to see it personally, But the politics can't be messed up. The empire also can't be messed up. General of the Borders said that the place has signs of becoming part of great ruins. They are currently invading eternal peace. A private worry took root in xianxia, and she looked toward the west. Cult Master is currently heading there. What exactly is happening there for great ruins to start expanding? Qin Mu rode the dragon until it was evening, and they finally came to the surroundings of God-broken mountain range. He raised his head to look at it, and his heart suddenly jumped. He could only see gray fog covering the place in layer after layer. When the sun set in the west, it was soon drowned out. Something is wrong. God-broken mountain range was very long, and the width of the mountains was also very great. The mountain range separated great ruins and eternal peace, taking up 100 miles. Now it had sunk down. What replaced it was thick gray fog. Dull tremors came from it from time to time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor activated Earthquake Cauldron and broke this piece of mountain range, sinking the mountains down into the ground. Qin Mu could sense the tremors from the gray fog, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. Since Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used Earthquake Cauldron, it showed that he'd felt powerless to defend himself. He then didn't hesitate to take all of them down with him just to block them from crossing over God-broken mountains. When the sun set, darkness invaded from the west, and it was like a black flood had covered the sky, swallowing everything on the way. Every place it passed by vanished without a trace. The darkness seemed to have substance and actually came to God-broken mountain range, drowning it. The darkness flooded to the front of Qin Mu's face before suddenly stopping. Qin Mu raised his head and saw that the darkness was like a straight cliff whose top couldn't be seen. It separated the night of eternal peace from that of his home. Great ruins has swallowed God-broken mountain range and spread toward Eternal Peace Empire. The darkness just swallowed up 100 miles. Qin Mu bent over and took out a flag to stab it where the darkness of great ruins touched the night of eternal peace. He said in a low voice, "In a few more days, we will know if the darkness is truly spreading or it has stopped. If the darkness of great ruins is expanding, it would probably be a catastrophic disaster to Eternal Peace Empire. Divine Flood Dragon King, let's go in." Divine Flood Dragon King acknowledged and transformed into the youth. Divine light shone around his body, and he brought Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin into the ruins of God-broken mountain range. "Flood dragons, come on to me." Qin Mu gave a low shout and executed secrets of dragon control. The flood dragons flew toward him and coiled around his body. 2 of them hung themselves from his ears like earrings. Instantly, the magic power of the flood dragons fused with his, causing Qin Mu's abilities to soar frantically. 9 heavens awaken. Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes, and he opened his 9 heavens' eyes. Divine lights shot out from his eyes and through the darkness. Wherever his gaze passed, it was like a light hole had pierced the darkness and the gray fog. The Divine Flood Dragon King didn't have such an ability and was pretty envious. Qin Mu let him follow close to him as they slowly went deeper into the ruins of God-broken mountains. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped, and the Divine Flood Dragon King also did so. What they saw in front of them were pieces of a tattered painting floating past silently. It was Def's painting, but the things within it had already shattered. Something seemed to have jumped out of it, tearing it apart. However, there was still a remnant of terrifying power within it. If they accidentally touched it, they would face great danger. Qin Mu avoided the painting and started walking again. He then suddenly stopped once more, for he saw hundreds of tattered paintings of all sizes floating silently in the gray fog. There were also chunks of large mountain rocks mixed among them. Qin Mu frowned. They should be in Def's battlefield, since he was skilled in painting. His world in painting had thousands of different sites that were grand and magnificent. Even experts like Xing would be sealed if they weren't careful and find it difficult to break free. For Def to have so many tattered paintings at this place, one could imagine how fierce the battle had been. "Your Majesty, be careful." The Divine Flood Dragon hurriedly jumped in front of Qin Mu, defending him. "Don't touch these rocks. They contain a god's aura and has their divine arts left inside." Qin Mu hurriedly pulled away, But then he saw a huge body slowly moving in the darkness and gray fog. It was walking over to them. They saw that the body was indomitable when it got closer to them. They could only see an incomparably thick leg obstructing their vision, but no upper body. Qin Mu raised his head and shone the divine light from his eyes upwards to gradually see a wide chest high above them. Looking upwards some more, he saw an imposing face of a god. A stone statue. Qin Mu's scalp crawled. A stone statue was walking in the darkness and the gray fog. The divine flood dragon king also felt his blood running cold. In front of them was an incomparably tall and sturdy stone statue whose size was beyond their imagination. Not only that, that stone statue was even walking in the darkness. Maha! The flood dragons on Qin Mu's body were frightened and pulled back their heads. Don't cry. The dragon Qilan's face was ashen as he spoke softly. If you wake him up, he will ride you to kill people. I was ridden the whole night. Suddenly, the stone statue bent down as if having heard something. A huge face pushed through the darkness and appeared in front of Qin Mu and the rest. Hu Linger rolled her eyes and collapsed on the floor as though she had fainted. Her legs were held upwards stiffly while her tail was straight. When the flood dragons and the dragon Qilan saw the situation, they immediately learned from her example and lay down on the ground to play dead. Young master. Hu Linger squinted her eyes and poked Qin Mu. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before collapsing on his back and sticking out his tongue. His body was stiff, his face black, making it look like he had died very miserably. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 433, Contact with Another World. Updated by novelfull.net. When the divine flood dragon king saw Qin Mu also lying on the floor and acting dead, he was at a loss. He was a god, the divine flood dragon king, the esteemed god of the flood dragons, so how could he escape from trouble by shamelessly playing dead like Hu Linger and the rest? Thump! The divine flood dragon king collapsed onto the floor, his limbs distorting. His death seemed to be even more miserable than that of Qin Mu, which made it evident it wasn't his first time playing dead. The huge head came down, but its eyes seemed to be bad. The giant face literally brushed across everyone's bodies as they held their breaths and remained motionless. The stone statue let out a long hiss before slowly straightening up to walk into the darkness. The thumping footsteps gradually went away. This stone statue seems to be looking for something. Qin Mu jumped up and pondered over it. Where did it come from? Great ruins? Or another world? What is it looking for? Hu Linger and all of the flood dragons crawled up while the divine flood dragon king patted the dust off his body. Hu Linger praised him. Divine flood dragon king, among all of us, you're the best at playing dead. You must have practiced it many times. When you are free, you must teach me more. The divine flood dragon king's face flushed and he muttered, I did not. Don't talk nonsense. Playing dead is all about talent. Qin Mu walked away while saying, Let's continue our search. Everyone be careful, since we don't know if there are other stone statues here. Divine Flood Dragon King, what's your opinion of the one we saw earlier? The Divine Flood Dragon King thought for a moment before saying, That stone statue is most likely not from Great Ruins. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Not from Great Ruins? Why do you say so? The stone statues in Great Ruins brave the wind and rain, frost and cold, so all of them are very old and worn down. But this stone statue was quite clean and fresh, as though it had just become a stone statue. But the Divine Flood Dragon King couldn't be sure. However, there are also stone statues in Great Ruins that are most peculiar, so it could be one which hides in some sealed space where the elements cannot reach it. Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely as he pondered over it. Could there have been numerous stone statues hidden under God-broken mountain range? When it was destroyed, could they have risen up? It's a possibility, the Divine Flood Dragon King said. Your Majesty, Dragon-Rearing Sovereign, had once said that the origin of God-broken mountain range was very fishy. It surrounded Great Ruins, separating it and eternal peace. Great Ruins was in a piece of chaos, yet it was peaceful outside it, so there definitely had to be something wrong with God-broken mountain range. As they entered deeper into the strange place, The gray fog and the darkness grew thicker and thicker. The air was filled with a dullness that could make one go crazy, and from time to time, trembling from earthquake cauldron would come from afar. Qin Mu headed toward the tremors, and not long after, they encountered a second stone statue. It also seemed to be searching for something. Divine Flood Dragon King's words make sense. Qin Mu avoided the stone statue and thought to himself, "These stone statues are most likely from under the God-broken mountain range." A mountain range being able to hold back the peculiarity of great ruins was strange by itself. On what did it rely on to block the darkness of great ruins? Since Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used Earthquake Cauldron to shatter God-broken mountain range, the darkness of great ruins had expanded by 100 miles. Just from this point, it could be seen that God-broken mountain range had really possessed the ability to block the darkness. The mountain range should have appeared after founding Emperor Empire was wiped out and become great ruins. Qin Mu had once heard people saying that some god had created God-broken mountain range to separate eternal peace and great ruins and prevent people from great ruins to come in. When they created the mountains, they reached Mount Meru's area, but because there was someone on top of Great Thunderclap Monastery, they took a detour. It couldn't be said for sure, but the god who had created the mountain range might have also buried numerous stone statues underneath it. Young Master, could this stone statue be one of those that popped up in Eternal Peace Empire? Hu Linger asked. As Qin Mu froze, stunned, she added, "It might be the god statues from near God-broken mountain range. Because many gods of high heavens and other strong practitioners had died here, the stone statues could use them as sacrificial offerings to come back to life." "There's this possibility as well," Qin Mu said with some suspicion. "If that's the case, what are the stone statues looking for?" "Of course, it's the earthquake cauldron that shattered God-broken mountain range," Hu Linger said as though it was expected. "Earthquake cauldron is their weapon, and they need to find it to release all of its power. Although Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shattered God-broken mountain range, he definitely didn't release everything that was inside the cauldron." "Linger is really smart," Qin Mu praised. The little fox was proud of herself. "It's just that since the stone statues can move, why don't they look for other meteorological weapons?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Finding other weapons would be much easier. On top of that, this place is still trembling, so it's evident that Earthquake Cauldron is still releasing its power continuously. With that, it shouldn't be too difficult for the stone statues to find it from the direction of the tremors. Because of that, what you guessed should be wrong. Divine Flood Dragon King's guess is more logical." Hu Linger's proudness vanished without a trace. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped and collapsed to the floor to play dead again. Incomparably heavy footsteps came from in front of them as a tall stone statue walked toward them. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and saw that the back of that stone statue was filled with flags. They had also petrified, but there was a huge eye on each and every flag, which looked very strange. Lumps of black chi poured into the flags behind the stone statue. With it, one of the eyes on a flag gradually transformed from rock into flesh and blood. The eye slowly became a true eye. It rolled around in the flag, looking very rough. It was obvious that the energy wasn't enough for it to completely break free of its petrified state. "Devil Eye. The stone statue is a devil." Qin Mu's scalp crawled and he almost jumped up. Since it was a devil, it definitely couldn't be a stone statue from under God-broken mountain range. What walked in great ruins in the darkness were the monsters of the devil race. They weren't afraid of the strangeness because they were the peculiarity themselves. Qin Mu once met a devil god in the darkness, and he had lured them forward, making him mistake the outskirts of Fengdu as carefree village. Village chief had even fought with him. That's not right. If these stone statues are devil gods, why did they become stone statues? The devil gods I saw in the past were all full of vigor. All kinds of thoughts jumped around in his head, and he suddenly thought of a possibility. The world of the stone statues wasn't the one overlapping with great ruins and eternal peace. They weren't the devil gods from great ruins, but had come from another world. Because they traversed into another world, their corporeal bodies turned into stone, and their power still remained outside. What exactly is going on in this place? Qin Mu's mind was groggy. At night in great ruins, there were 3 to 5 different worlds, But now that God-broken mountain range had crumbled, a new world had shown up. Is that new world going to overlap with eternal peace? Why did such an unimaginable thing happen? Just as he thought this far, the devil eye on the flag rolled to survey the surroundings. Suddenly, its gaze landed on Qin Mu and the rest who were playing dead on the ground, and playfulness appeared in it. Fear struck Qin Mu's heart. The flag suddenly fell off the back of the stone statue and landed right in front of them. Qin Mu abandoned his plans to play dead and immediately rose while shouting, "Divine Flood Dragon King!" The Divine Flood Dragon King instantly transformed back into his original form when he heard him. Qin Mu brought Hu Linger to jump onto it, while the Dragon Qilin led the other flood dragons to climb up the dragon's back. The Divine Flood Dragon then whooshed and rushed away. Behind them, the stone statue turned around and its hands slammed down at an extremely fast speed. The Divine Flood Dragon King roared, and all his vital chi exploded, turning into a torrenting flood. It transformed into a long river which quickly coiled around the arm of the stone statue, trying to crush it. The arm of that stone statue bent and straightened, and with that, the divine art of the Divine Flood Dragon King was shattered. He felt his blood ran cold and shouted, "Your Majesty, it's a true god. It should be a true devil." Qin Mu corrected him. The stone statue raised its feet and caught up to them in a few steps. The other hand came slamming down, and the Divine Flood Dragon King avoided the strike. In the meantime, the flag soared into the sky before landed on the ground. The devil eye on it continued to stare at the group. When the Divine Flood Dragon King escaped a certain distance away, the petrified flag would soar up once again and land close to them. It was like a hopping flag. The stone statue is relying on that eye to see. Without it, the devil god won't be able to locate us. Qin Mu instantly came to a realization and took out Sun Jade Eye from his Taotai sack. He immediately placed it eye on the dragon's back and activated it without a word. A beam of Sun Divine Ray tore apart the darkness and the fog, slicing at the eye on the flag. A black ray instantly shot out from the devil eye as well, blocking the Sun Divine Ray. Qin Mu grabbed Moon Jade Eye with his other hand and adjusted its direction. A thin light blade shot out from Moon Jade Eye, and wherever it passed by, space would literally solidify into substance. The rays from one eye and a moon instantly tore apart the black ray from the devil eye and shattered the eye. The petrified flag was left with only a broken hole. Using Moon Jade Eye and Sun Jade Eye together seems to result in an even greater power. Qin Mu suppressed the astonishment in his heart and raised his head to look at the stone statue. Its movements suddenly stopped, and it tilted its ears as though it was trying to hear something. "Don't move," Qin Mu whispered under his breath. The Divine Flood Dragon King immediately stopped and Qin Mu said softly, "Slowly walk, don't hurry." The Divine Flood Dragon King slowly crept forward in fear of making any sound while Qin Mu stared intensely at the stone statue. It seemed to be looking around, smashing here and kicking there, but it didn't notice them. Suddenly, the Divine Flood Dragon King's body paused and he said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, continue walking." Qin Mu didn't turn back his head. "Your Majesty, look ahead," the Divine Flood Dragon King croaked. Hu Linger's voice was also trembling. "Young Master, look ahead. Ahead." Qin Mu was slightly stunned and turned back to look before them. As his eyes caught sight of what the others were referring to, he couldn't help staring blankly, all his sense having flown out. Behind them, the stone statue pummeled everything and shattered the whole place, slowly closing in on them. Yet Qin Mu seemed to feel nothing. After some time, he muttered, "Imperial Preceptor, what have you done?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 434, Impressive Sight of Heaven and Earth. In front of them, the sky and the land seemed to be connected together. The already strange sight was made even more shocking by a huge hole blown between them. It was difficult to describe it since the sky was empty before, so how could a hole be blown through it? The land was incomparably thick. It couldn't be penetrated even if a huge hole had been drilled through it, which presented another kind of inconceivable and impressive sight. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had to have used Earthquake Cauldron at the crucial moment, borrowing the divine art of the meteorological weapon to pierce through the land and the sky of this world and another world, creating the magnificent sight of the two coming together. Furthermore, the power of Earthquake Cauldron was extremely great, to the extent that the wound between two worlds still hadn't recovered. The barriers of the two worlds couldn't heal themselves. In front of the huge hole, great ruins and eternal peace were at night, while behind the hole, there was a sun rising, shining on a black and tall devil castle. The sky of the other world was situated under the horizon of Godbroken Mountain Range, while the land was in the sky above Godbroken Mountain Range. From Qin Mu's angle, he could see the land of that world, and there were all kinds of sharp buildings which looked like long knives, long swords, and spears. Those buildings were 10,000 feet tall and were built with great denseness. It was a completely different style of construction compared to that in Eternal Peace. Grand and sinister devil castles were situated up and down huge mountains extending without end into the distance. Some of them were even floating in the sky. Sunlight shone on them, casting shadows on God-broken mountain range. The trees and mountains of that world had abnormal shapes. They were twisted and terrifying. Sunlight from the other world shone over from the ground and hit the bodies of Qin Mu and the rest. Standing in front of the incomparably huge circular hole, they were miniature like ants. The sunlight from the other world lengthened their shadows, but compared to the hole, the shadows were incomparably fine. Under their feet was the sun and the land was above their heads. It was like they were standing in front of a mirror which reflected things upside down. On top of that, the hole was still trembling gently, making the rocks in the surroundings of God-broken mountain range rise in the air from the continuous shakes. The bodies of Qin Mu and the rest turned numb from the tremors, and their primordial spirits grew unstable. One could only imagine what terrifying energy had been unleashed when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used Earthquake Cauldron. The earthquakes here are coming from the hole. It isn't Imperial Preceptor who's still using Earthquake Cauldron. Qin Mu's heart sank. After going into God-broken mountain range, he sensed tremors from time to time and thought that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was still using Earthquake Cauldron. Never did he expect them to be coming from the hole that connected two worlds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wasn't there, and his life and death were unknown. Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the land floating in the sky. A powerful devil god stood there, sending out his primordial spirit as his corporeal body petrified. There were numerous strangely shaped devils that were like hard-working ants surrounding the devil god's petrified body to construct a large sacrificial altar. Tens of thousands of slaves were led up them to be executed, creating the blood sacrifice to send the devil god's stone statue over. A wizard wearing white bones and feathers on his head was casting a spell on the large sacrificial altar. The sight of blood flowing around it was captured in the eyes of Qin Mu and the rest. It was a kind of cruel beauty. The sight was shocking, cruel, and terrifying. That world was still in a barbaric and bloody era. Their divine arts were very primitive and reeked of blood. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor can be said to have brought huge trouble. Qin Mu's scalp crawled. Earthquake Cauldron had opened a passageway to another world, and there seemed to be numerous devil gods in that world. When they saw the world of Eternal Peace Empire, they were naturally happy at seeing a new prey. Desire to conquer rose in their hearts, and they didn't hesitate to even petrify their bodies to send themselves to eternal peace. However, what was weird was that after the stone statues of the devil gods passed through, they didn't try to execute an even larger sacrifice to open up the hole created by Earthquake Cauldron. Instead, they were searching around for something. Besides, it's such a huge hole, so why can't we see any devils coming through it? Qin Mu was puzzled. The divine Flood Dragon King seemed to have discovered something, for he said, "Your Majesty, the army of the devils is on the sacrificial altar over there." Qin Mu looked in the direction, and his heart filled with fear. The slaves of the devil world were constructing a large sacrificial altar that was numerous times larger than the one he'd seen earlier. Its body was like a huge mountain shaved flat, and tens of thousands of devil wizards were floating around, using the blood of the slaves to paint various runes. Meanwhile, at the border of the sacrificial altar, The devil army was walking with grandeur toward the center. They had to be preparing to use the opportunity presented to them to send their army into eternal peace. Could it be that they can't cross this hole and have to rely on the power of blood sacrifice for their warriors to pass? Qin Mu stared blankly. He stretched his hand out to try to cross into the other world, but he met an invisible barrier. There was clearly another world in front of him, but he couldn't enter it. The divine flood dragon king and the dragon Qilin also tried it. The stronger they were, the stronger the resistance. They couldn't enter another's time and space. Suddenly, they heard a loud sound as though a heavy object had landed on the ground. It startled Qin Mu and the rest back to their senses. A devil god's stone statue had been sent over from the world on the other side. The 300 yards tall stone statue stood quietly to their right, about 300 yards away. On its surface, runes formed by fresh blood moved continuously and changed shape, gradually sinking into the stone. The statue suddenly twitched and slowly moved its body. It was evident that the wizards in the other world had used the slaves as blood sacrifices to give it the ability to move by itself. It's just that the devil gods still couldn't transfer their massive energy over, so the stone statues couldn't change back to their corporeal bodies. Quickly, go! The divine flood dragon king immediately sprinted into the distance, circling the huge hole. Qin Mu stood on its back and looked behind them. He saw the stone statue bend down and crawl toward the earth. Its arms pushed into the earth like drills, and soon the whole stone statue went head first into the earth. In no time, there was no longer any sign of it having ever been there. This stone statue seems to be searching for something too. What is it exactly? Imperial Preceptor, Grandpa Blind, are they still all alive? If they are alive, where are they hiding? Qin Mu executed 9 heavens' divine eyes and carefully searched for traces of Imperial Preceptor and the rest. As they continued to head north, he saw more signs of battle. There were marks left behind by Butcher and Blind as they fought the gods of high heavens. Divine Flood Dragon King, be careful. Qin Mu saw a black line that was staying still in the air, and the Divine Flood Dragon King stopped. He was slightly stunned as he also saw something wrong. He went around the black line. When his line of sight shifted, he saw the black line become wider. It was a knife light that had paused in the air. It had sliced apart space but then got stuck. However, the power of the divine art in the knife didn't fade away, so the space couldn't heal. What a terrifying knife skill! The Divine Flood Dragon King couldn't help shivering. Such a knife skill could be known as a divine knife. When it reached the realm of Tao, it was invulnerable and extremely terrifying. Grandpa Butcher is Heaven Knife, and this is pig slaughtering knife skills. Qin Mu couldn't help exclaiming in astonishment. He had also learned pig slaughtering knife skills before, but he could never match Butcher's level. Butcher's knife was too wild. Even if other people learned his skills, it would be difficult for them to unleash their power. Only by becoming as crazy as Butcher could they unleash the power of his knife skills. Next, the group saw a sea of scorching flames smelting the mountains. Even the darkness found it difficult to consume that sea of flames. Grandpa Mute's furnace has been shattered. Qin Mu was astonished. The reason for the sea of flames was Mute's furnace. Once it shattered, the flames inside spilled out in all directions. Could Grandpa Mute have died? They crossed the sea of flames and Qin Mu suddenly saw old Rulai. He was sitting in a lotus position, with 20 heavens surrounding him. Gods and Buddhas of all sizes sat in his surroundings. Beside them was a god of high heavens, and the two men were facing each other. For a moment, Qin Mu was stunned, then sighed. He bowed at old Rulai and picked him up to bring him to the Divine Flood Dragon King's back. They then continued on their way. Hu Linger turned her head back to ask curiously, "Young master, why is that old monk not moving and even need you to carry him?" Qin Mu shook his head and said, "He has already taken that god down with him." Hu Linger was stunned. Not long later, Qin Mu saw old Tao Master. The old Taoist was clutching a sword technique with one hand and holding a sword with another. There was a celestial air to him as he stood with his head raised to look at the god who had pulled half of his body out from the mountain he had possessed. There was a smile on old Tao Master's face. Divine lights shot off from Qin Mu's eyes, and he saw that the heart of the god's brows had been pierced by a sword. The wound left behind was very fine and hard to notice. He looked at old Tao Master and saw that his body was tattered. There were injuries everywhere, but they were no longer bleeding. Is the old Taoist still alive? Hu Linger asked. Qin Mu shook his head and walked down to bring old Tao Master up while saying softly. His blood ran out. His last attack must have changed his primordial spirit into a sword which he stabbed into the heart of that god's brows. His primordial spirit transformed into Tao after the stab and exploded with power, destroying itself as well. Once the power of the move was exhausted, the primordial spirit also dispersed. People who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Even though Heavenly Devil Cult and Tao Sex paths were different, Qin Mu was still extremely respectful to this old Tao Master. Hu Linger became solemn and straightened her clothes. She then bowed respectfully to old Tao Master. A high-minded and righteous person in his old age, one with heart full of fierce passion. Salute! When the flood dragons saw this, they all stood up on their hind legs and cupped their claws together. Maha! They continued to walk forward until they saw a huge snake lying on the ground. It was Willow Immortal. The group saw less and less of the stone statues from the other world, but the atmosphere became more and more somber. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes wrinkled in fear of seeing the corpses of Cripple, Granny C, and the rest. He dragged Willow Immortal on the Divine Flood Dragon King's back as well. Village Chief said that there needed to be a person to collect the corpses. Senior Sister Willow Immortal, I'm here. Follow me home. They then saw White Immortal, who was covered in silver-colored spikes upon which a ball of thread was tangled. He held a plate with silver needles in his hand. There was a huge hole in his chest, a hand still sticking out from it. He had to have killed his opponent and not expected him to still manage to take his life before succumbing to death. The surroundings were completely silent, with only mountain rocks floating in the darkness and fog. Qin Mu and the rest walked over, and a magnetic force under their feet seemed to vanish. There was a strange force field there, and Qin Mu raised his head to look at the stars. Great overarching heavenly stars. Granny. His heart couldn't help skipping a beat. Updated by Novelful. Above them was the starry sky formed by great overarching heavenly stars palm force, and he saw Granny C sitting motionlessly in the starry sky. The beautiful woman had her palms stretched out as if she had just used her art. She looked magnificent. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 435 returned just like the swallows. Qin Mu suppressed the unease in his heart and shifted his gaze from Granny C's body. He then saw Butcher with his knife standing on a heavenly star. His body was tall and sturdy. The two knives were side by side, but he didn't move as well. Qin Mu then saw Hermit Qingyu. He was wielding a horsetail whisk, which at that moment was placed next to his elbow. He sat in a lotus position, and the thing upon which he was sitting was also a star. Next, Qin Mu saw Mute standing on a fire star of great overarching heavenly stars. Qin Mu's heart shook violently, and he nearly vomited blood. He shifted his gaze with difficulty and saw Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. The man sat on Earthquake Cauldron below, which was one of the stars of great overarching heavenly stars. Qin Mu shifted his gaze from his body and saw Rat Immortal, Fox Immortal, and the other people. Cripple had brought Apothecary, who was still bleeding, to sit on one of the stars as well. Blind had his head lowered while leaning on his bamboo cane. There was also a star under his feet. Old Ma was like a Buddha. Deaf was holding onto a brush. Queen E held her wing knife, and King Kuin still possessed the horn on his head. They were also within great overarching heavenly stars that had burst forth from Granny C's palm. Each and every one of them was standing on a star. Where's Sister Jing? Why is she not here? Qin Mu hurriedly looked around, trying to find traces of Yen Jingjing. Even if it was Sun's ship, it couldn't block the gods of high heavens, right? Suddenly, a beam of bright light swept past them, and Qin Mu saw a sun. It was half black, so only when it turned over were they basked in its bright rays. Sun's ship was extremely huge, so even if its body was blocked by a mountain peak, the sunlight could still be faintly seen coming from the other side. Yet Sun Ship showed no movement. Its aura could not be felt. Qin Mu's heart suddenly sank. Hu Linger at that moment said, "Young master, I don't see yellow immortal and tuxing foam." Qin Mu composed himself and continued to look around with the two divine rays shooting out from his eyes. He saw a god standing behind Granny C with his fingers put together like a sword, pointing at the back of her head. Yet that god was frozen in place and couldn't move. Next, Qin Mu saw Flower Sovereign of High Heavens. She was a woman with flowers blooming under her feet, filling the sky as though they had grown from the sky. She stood upside down on one of the flowers as though she was walking on the sky to attack great overarching heavenly star force field. Yet she also was frozen, not moving at all. Qin Mu then saw a third god which was in the sky above Sun Ship. He was stretching his claws out as though to attack someone on the ship. Yet he was also frozen in the air. Qin Mu looked farther back and saw other gods of high heavens. They were in different poses, like they had been caught in the middle of battle. Not one god was still able to move. Are they dead? Qin Mu wanted to stabilize his mind, but he kept finding it hard to do so. This sight was simply too peculiar. Everyone was standing motionless as though time had stopped. But if the time had truly stopped, how were Qin Mu and the rest not affected? Your Majesty, they should still be alive, the Divine Flood Dragon King suddenly said. I can still feel their aura. Their breaths are long and drawn out. Only a few of them don't have any breath left. What's weird is that their primordial spirits are not in their bodies. It's as if they had been pulled out from within them. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Primordial spirits were pulled out of their bodies? The Divine Flood Dragon King nodded and said, There are no primordial spirits in these bodies. I can guess from Granny C and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's positions that it should be some sort of primordial spirit formation. When their divine arts suddenly burst forth, everyone's primordial spirits were forcefully dragged out of their bodies. If I were to continue with this guess, their injuries had to have been so severe that they could only decide to use primordial spirits to fight. Qin Mu left out a sigh of relief, and his heart relaxed a little. They aren't dead. They're just fighting with their primordial spirits. Divine Flood Dragon King, you are more knowledgeable in this. Do you know where their primordial spirits go? The speed of a primordial spirit is very fast. It can travel tens of thousands of miles in a flash, moving through the boundless void. So their primordial spirits shouldn't be here. Their destination is not something I could know. Qin Mu was stumped for words. The next moment, though, he asked in an astringent voice, Which of them have no more breath left? The Divine Flood Dragon King pointed at Apothecary, then Cripple, Deaf, King Kuan, and Rat Immortal. Qin Mu's heart became heavier and heavier. There are also some gods of high heavens who have no more breath left. Their primordial spirits must have lost the battle. The Divine Flood Dragon King said in a low voice. Qin Mu's face darkened, and he rose to reach Sun Ship. He saw that everyone on it was frozen. From that, it was obvious that when Granny C and the rest have executed the primordial spirit formation, the primordial spirits of everyone in the surroundings were brought away, no matter if they were mortals or gods. Young Master. Hu Linger saw Qin Mu's face, and her heart grew uneasy. Young Master, they won't die. Qin Mu closed his eyes before opening them up again with determination. Divine Flood Dragon King, come and lend me your power. I want to use the magic power of God to execute Soul Guide. As long as their souls aren't extinguished, I'll be able to summon them back. The Divine Flood Dragon King hesitated for a moment before saying, Young Master, your corporeal body might not be able to handle my magic power. I'm different from these flood dragons. I'm a god and they aren't. You can withstand with your divine bridge, divine treasure, the borrowing of their power. But if you borrow my magic power, you will only burst your divine bridge, divine treasure, since the bridge itself is broken. I tell you to lend me, so just lend me. Qin Mu said firmly. The Divine Flood Dragon King was helpless and could only place the corpses of Old Tao Master, Old Rulai, and the rest down. Your Majesty, I will transform into a huge dragon which will lie on your backbone to support your corporeal body, so it won't be blown into pieces. However, I can't protect the divine treasures. If your majesty can't endure it, just give me the word and I will take back my magic power. Do it! The form of the divine flood dragon king rapidly shrunk and transformed into a 3 yards long sapphire blue flood dragon which stuck itself to Qin Mu's back. It then gradually faded out, transforming into a sapphire blue marking of a flood dragon on Qin Mu's back. It was like a tattoo. Qin Mu executed secrets of dragon control and instantly borrowed the magic power of the flood dragons. Explosions could be heard coming from his body as his 7 stars divine treasure, celestial being divine treasure, life and death divine treasure, and divine bridge divine treasures were all awakened. The magic power of the flood dragons was already extremely dense and filled his divine bridge to the brim. Next, he directed the magic power of the divine flood dragon king, and instantly, his vigorous magic power broke through divine bridge divine treasure and went straight to celestial heavens. Qin Mu's primordial spirit was struck by all that magic power and crossed over to the other shore, past the divine bridge. He was lifted by the violent magic power toward the celestial palaces. However, the magic power of the divine flood dragon king wasn't enough to bring him all the way to celestial heavens. He was forced to stop at the southern heavenly gates, which was considered just having entered the realm. Your Majesty's divine bridge is not broken. The divine flood dragon king was ineffably shocked, but at that moment, Qin Mu roused his incomparably vigorous magic power and cryptic devil language came out from his mouth as he executed Soul Guide. It was the spell of 9 Spectres sect and no remarkable divine art in Eternal Peace Empire, but it was something which had once caused turmoil in the land. When Qin Mu had first entered Imperial College to learn techniques and divine arts, he didn't choose any with astonishing power. Instead, he found Soul Guide and Ghost Transferring Gods Dispatching Runes Command, as he felt that these 2 spells were exotic and able to unleash power beyond one's imagination. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes Command was a spell left behind in Eternal Peace Empire by Duqian Devil King, who had schemed to use it to seize land for his people's new home. The origin of Soul Guide should not rest with 9 Spectres sect either. It was not something they could have founded. This spell seemed to have a connection with Yudu, and Qin Mu even suspected at one point that it was probably from there. It was a spell which belonged to the soul category of Yudu. It was just that his knowledge of Yudu language was still lacking, and he didn't know much about the mysterious Yudu world, so he couldn't develop the spell to its extreme. Even so, his attainments in Soul Guide had already far surpassed what 9 Spectres sect had shown back then. Gate of Heaven Influence, open, Qin Mu shouted out, and a terrifying door suddenly opened up behind him. His magic power was violent, and the Gate of Heaven Influence also became abnormally huge and tall. The 2 doors of the several hundred yards gate opened up, and Yudu world instantly appeared in the darkness. Devil Chi rolled out and invaded the darkness of great ruins, giving off an aura that made the hearts of ghost gods pound. 9 Spectres sect's divine arts practitioners couldn't cultivate Gate of Heaven Influence. They could only borrow Soul Guide to form gates that connected to Yudu's gate, but Qin Mu could. The Gate of Heaven Influence that he had cultivated was authentic. After the gate opened up, the power of the spell of Soul Guide instantly burst forth, and runes emanating with faint glow rushed into Yudu. They lit up a path in the darkness which looked like a floating bridge stretching non-stop into the depths. After a moment, the mountain rocks suddenly overturned as skeletons tunneled out from underground, dancing and gesticulating in joy. In Eternal Peace Empire and Great Ruins, the land bulged up continuously. All kinds of corpses and skeletons flooded out from the ground. Their mouths opened and closed, but no sounds came out. Qin Mu frowned. More and more souls were being guided over by him out of Yudu, but even though they belonged to various life forms which had died nearby, he didn't manage to call over the souls of Apothecary, Cripple, and the rest. They are not in Yudu? No matter who took you guys away, I will find you. Qin Mu gritted his teeth and gave an angry roar. Gate of Heaven Influence suddenly expanded and the power of Soul Guide increased drastically. Grandpa Apothecary, bring your soul back here. Fengdu is right in front. In the living realm of the dead, a bird-headed mutant was leading a group of people. He said to Apothecary, Cripple and Deaf, "Your old friend is waiting for you on the bridge of helplessness." Old friend. Apothecary was at a loss. Which old friend? That bird-headed god smiled. You will know when you get there. When they came to the bridge of helplessness, Apothecary, Cripple, and the rest were stunned when they saw an able-bodied village chief standing at the center of the bridge. Everyone, we meet again on the bridge of helplessness. You guys are still. Before he could finish his sentence, black fog churned under the bridge of helplessness and a huge whirlpool formed up. From it, an angry roar rang out. Grandpa Apothecary, bring your soul back here. Apothecary, Cripple, and the rest on the bridge suddenly felt their world start spinning as they got dragged into the whirlpool by the bizarre power. They fell into the depths without any ability to resist. An imposing shout of anger came from Fengdu. Which demon dares to create a ruckus in my Fengdu? King Yama's body gradually rose, and he looked down into the whirlpool in the depths of which he saw Qin Mu's face. King Yama was slightly stunned. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 436 Scapegoats. In Fengdu City, gods and devils flew over to surround King Yama and looked down at the bridge. When they saw the whirlpool, their faces changed drastically. They were about to make a move, but King Yama raised his hand and said solemnly, "No need for that. Let him go." The gods and devils of Fengdu City were all rather puzzled. The divine art below the bridge is of Yudu. That place has come to our Fengdu to steal our people. So how can we tolerate them? Another god then added, "If Yudu continues to create a ruckus, we will be unable to keep our Fengdu for long. King Yama, let's attack Yudu." King Yama shook his head. When he spoke, his voice was slightly strange. The person who used the divine art of Yudu is neither a god nor devil of Yudu, but a guest from Carefree Village. I've seen this face before, it's very similar to that person. There's no need to delve into this. Under the cape of darkness, his gaze was like candlelight, burning with a ghostly glow. A person of Carefree Village has shown up. I was waiting for the old swallow of the previous dynasty and old dreams to return to rebuild its nest. But what can I do when a new swallow comes instead of the old one? It's time for the return of swallows that I've met before. Old or new, it's hard to distinguish, village chief said. King Yama lowered his head to look at him. His cape fluttered in the sky above Fengdu City, and his figure leapt into the distance. Village chief looked down the bridge and sighed. I thought I was going to have a reunion with Apothecary and the rest, but Qin Mu went and summoned them back. I wonder if their corporeal bodies are dead or not. If they are, we will still have to reunite in Fengdu. Master, what's the river below the bridge of helplessness? Legends say that it originates in Yudu. We call it the River of Forgetfulness. The human emperor before his master came to his side and looked down the river. There are many stories here, and it'd be hard to tell you all of them in a short while. There are plenty of monsters in the river. They come from Yudu and are extremely terrifying. The strong practitioner who had executed the divine art of Yudu to snatch the people had found his way here through the River of Forgetfulness. You should be very familiar with that person, right? He looked at village chief's face, and his gaze flickered. You were the closest, but when you heard his voice, you didn't make a move to stop him. Village chief nodded, and with a hint of pride in his voice, he said, He's my disciple, the current human emperor. How's that, old bastard? The disciple I've chosen is better than the disciple you chose, right? Bah! Isn't the disciple I've chosen you, dumbass? Old bastard, die! In great overarching heavenly stars force field, Apothecary, Cripple, King Kuin, and the rest suddenly opened their eyes. Crap! My corporeal body has already died. I can't protect my primordial spirit anymore. Deaf suddenly said. King Kuin and Rat Immortal also woke up, and their expressions changed drastically. Their primordial spirits had left their corporeal bodies for too long, and as a result, their bodies had started to decay. The reason why the divine Flood Dragon King had noticed they had no breath was because of the death of their corporeal bodies. Muir, how long can you hold on for? Apothecary rose in a hurry and took out all kinds of herbs and silver needles. If you can hold on for a bit longer, I can extend our lives and revive our corporeal bodies, he said with nervousness on his face. Qin Mu stood in front of Gate of Heaven Influence, continuing to borrow the power of the Flood Dragons and the Divine Flood Dragon King to maintain Soul Guide. Grandpa Apothecary, don't worry. I can hold on for several days and nights. No need for that long. Apothecary took out a beehive and said, I shall first use soul termites to link our corporeal bodies and primordial spirits before using poison to nourish the former. The poison will cut off the connection between our primordial spirit and Fengdu and Yudu. I will then raise life substitution insects to die in our place. He tossed the beehive up, and it began to float as it grew bigger rapidly. Inside it, there were insect eggs and strange seeds of all sizes. The insects in the milky white eggs were all different from one another. Apothecary rapidly cultivated poison and refined medicine. He tapped on everyone's bodies with all kinds of unpredictable hand techniques, and soon the sound of hearts beating came from their bodies. Apothecary quickly used silver needles to stab them all over their bodies. Def looked at the insect egg nervously, but the next moment, his mouth was pinched open by Apothecary to stuff in the egg. Def's face turned ashen. Apothecary quickly dug up holes and planted a few seeds. After a moment, they germinated and huge buds grew out. The flowers swirled, and their petals spread outwards. Everyone, enter the flowers. Everyone did as told, and Cripple asked, Doctor of the martial world, what's this flower of yours? It's fleshy to the touch. Apothecary had a nervous expression. They're not flowers, but life substitution insects. Don't move. Let them swallow you guys. Life substitution insects? Everyone was slightly stunned. The huge flowers then pulled back and their petals closed up, wrapping everyone tightly inside. Those flowers were indeed not flowers, but a kind of bizarre insect. After swallowing everyone, they started to distort and gradually grew a head, 4 limbs, and a body. Their appearances were identical to the people they had swallowed. Qin Mu was stunned. He recognized King Kuan, Apothecary, and the rest and could find no fault. However, what was weird was that the insects actually had everyone's auras. They even imitated their souls and primordial spirits with an uncanny resemblance, so that others couldn't see any difference. What was even weirder was that Apothecary and the rest rapidly aged and grew white hair in an instant. In the blink of an eye, they aged from their middle years to their late years, before aging from their late years to their end. After a moment, Apothecary and the rest had exhausted their lifespans. They collapsed onto the ground without any breath left, covering the ground with corpses. Qin Mu dispersed Soul Guide, and peculiar auras surged from places unknown. From the depths of space, darkness surged out and lamps lighted up in the darkness as paper boats floated over. Elders stood up on them and raised their lamps at the corpses of Apothecary and the rest. Their souls floated out without any obvious awareness at all. They walked onto the paper boats with stupefied expressions, following the light of the elders' lamps. The paper boats turned away, and the messengers of death hung their lamps back onto the boats. They then sailed into darkness, and the bizarre auras vanished. That's good. The messengers of death have been tricked. Apothecary's voice came from underground, and the earth suddenly bulged as fleshy insect sacs popped out. Apothecary, Cripple, and the rest made their way, covered in sticky liquid. Apothecary pulled out the needles from everyone who was still very weak. Their primordial spirits were still slightly unstable. Apothecary checked and said, Half of the soul termite is in the soul and the other half is in the corporeal body. I first need to adjust your corporeal bodies, allowing them to recover, before I can fully revive you guys. But I've already exhausted all the spirit herbs I had on me. There's a pond of pure yang on Sun Ship which can recover life force rapidly. Qin Mu immediately said, That would be a great help. Apothecary let out a sigh of relief and said, Let's go soak in that pond of pure yang and recuperate our bodies. Those life substitution insects won't be able to trick the messengers of death for long. Everyone hurried over to Sun Ship, and since Qin Mu was familiar with the place, he quickly brought them to the pond of pure yang. Everyone went into it, and their corporeal bodies gradually recovered. However, the water in the pool also gradually lessened. When Qin Mu saw that everyone was no longer in danger, he asked, "Everyone, where had your primordial spirits went?" Rat Immortal let out a sigh of relief and said, "During the battle, Sun Guardian brought her ship to assist us, but the gods of high heavens were truly powerful. They had all kinds of divine arts and god treasures with immense power. Big sister and second brother died in battle one after another. Sun Guardian was also forced back, which left everyone on the brink of crisis. Imperial Preceptor activated Earthquake Cauldron, having chosen to bring everyone down together. He injured all the gods with the tremors, but something weird happened. Qin Mu looked at him with puzzlement, then suddenly came to realization. He cried out, "Earthquake Cauldron pierced the barrier between another world and eternal peace?" No, Cripple shook his head and said, "The power of Earthquake Cauldron was absorbed by God-broken mountain range." Qin Mu was stunned. "When I saw Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, that scoundrel, taking out Earthquake Cauldron, I immediately knew something was wrong, so I brought Apothecary to run for our lives. That's why we were slightly farther away. Def, you were much closer, so you tell him." Def plucked out his 2 iron ears and washed them in the pond of pure yang before stabbing them back into his ear holes. "When the power of Earthquake Cauldron exploded, I also knew it was bad and planned to hide in the world in the painting to escape unscathed. But never did I expect that the power of Earthquake Cauldron would simply be too terrifying. I didn't manage to escape in time, and the world in the painting was eradicated." At that moment, an unimaginable power suddenly came from God-broken mountain range to absorb the power of Earthquake Cauldron. Next, a huge hole formed in the heaven and earth, and on its other side was another world. Back then, they had been in a fierce battle, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor hadn't cared about the consequences and frightened everyone out of their wits. Yet the huge change in God-broken mountain range had allowed everyone to escape unscathed. They didn't have time to check on the situation of the other world before entering into a fierce battle again. The abilities of Flower Sovereign and Star Sovereign Xiao were simply too strong. No one could match them, so Flower Sovereign went to attack Sun's ship, planning to kill Yen Jingjing, and the situation grew grim. Granny C saw that it was bad and gathered everyone to lay down great overarching heavenly stars formation, executing it by force and pulling everyone's primordial spirit out of their bodies. She planned to launch a big battle with primordial spirits. Then, we entered a strange world. Def was slightly in a daze as he said, "Under God-broken mountain range, there was a strange world. It should be. King Kuan had more experience, so he explained, "The inner world of a god's treasure." Def nodded. "At that place, we were trapped and had to kill non-stop. In the end, we were killed, and after we died, we noticed a strange energy invading that world. Then we saw a bird-headed god flying over. He led us to Fengdu, saying that we'll meet an old friend there. But just as we saw Village Chief, we got dragged back by Yumuer." "Village Chief is in Fengdu?" Qin Mu was astonished, then felt a pain in his heart. He gripped his fist tightly. "Village Chief, I will definitely save you from Fengdu." But what was truly astonishing was that there had been an unknown energy blocking the power of Earthquake Cauldron under God-broken mountain range. It had even pulled everyone's primordial spirits into it. What was that treasure exactly? Why was it buried there? Who was the one who had forged it, and who was it that had buried it? What the stone statues of the devil gods from the other world are searching for is probably that treasure. Also, the primordial spirits of Granny C and the others should still be in that treasure. Just as Qin Mu thought that, the ground suddenly trembled, and mountain rocks rumbled down in the distance as a stone statue swirled while breaking through the earth to rise up. The devil god from before had found them from underground. At the same time, tremors came from the darkness, and Qin Mu looked over there. In the fog were numerous stone statues walking in their direction. They found that treasure. Qin Mu's expression changed abruptly. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 437, Huge Knife. Giant stone statues came close to the witch had come out from the ground, and all of them began to dig frantically. Their arms were throwing earth upwards like whirlwinds, and huge rocks were unearthed by them. Qin Mu and the rest on Sun Ship were astonished. The devil god's stone statues dug the ground at an extremely fast speed, even if they didn't look too good. Soon, they dug out a huge pit and gradually sunk into the ground. But there were still mountain rocks that were thrown out of the pit continuously. "These guys dig faster than dogs," Cripple muttered. King Kuan looked at Rat Immortal and asked, "Talking about digging holes other than Tuxing Feng, Rat Immortal is the next person in terms of ability." Rat Immortal stood up and said, "Let me see what they are trying to do." After he said that, he shook his body and transformed into a huge gray rat. He leaped forward as though he was flying and ran down Sun Ship. In a few breaths' time, he reached the ground and tunneled into it, vanishing without a trace. Rat Immortal is skilled in finding treasures and is called Treasure Uncle Rat. He can travel underground without any obstruction, so he will definitely find something, King Kuan explained. Qin Mu raised his head and looked at luxurious flowers filling the sky above their heads. They bloomed as they shrouded Sun Ship. Meanwhile, Flower Sovereign stood in the center of one flower as if she had grown out from it. "We need to dispose of the gods of high heavens." Qin Mu looked at Apothecary and the rest. "Do you have any ideas?" Apothecary smiled. "We didn't have any ideas before, but now we have." King Kuan pulled out his golden horn and said, "Let me do it." After he said that, he rose from the pond and paid his respects to the golden horn. It was his sacred artifact which had been refined into a golden spear. After he paid his respects, the golden horn flew out with a whoosh, and piercing sounds could be heard as a golden line rushed through the air. It was the trace left behind by the artifact. The golden line pierced through the heart of Flower Sovereign's brows and came out from the back of her head. It then rushed toward another god and pierced him the same way. The golden horn changed its direction once more at an extremely fast speed. After a moment, all the gods, including Star Sovereign Yen, had been visited by it. A melodious whistling could be heard, and the golden horn landed back in King Kuan's hands. The golden line in the sky gradually dimmed and slowly vanished. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly as he looked at the golden horn. There was not even a drop of blood on it, even if it had killed numerous gods, like Flower Sovereign and Star Sovereign Chao of the four sovereigns of high heavens. It was also undamaged. One had to know that the corporeal bodies of the gods of high heavens were incomparably strong, and even cult legacy treasures couldn't harm them in the slightest. Trying to attack their corporeal bodies by force was like smashing an egg against a rock and expecting it to shatter. But the sacred artifact of East Sea's Kuan people wasn't damaged in the slightest. This showed just how powerful was the treasure. However, even though the sacred artifact was strong, one had to also look at the person using it. When King Kuan had fought with the gods of high heavens earlier, the reason he couldn't win should have been because his abilities were not strong enough. "King Kuan, the 3 bridges method to fix the divine bridge have already been made public to everyone by me, so why don't you come ashore and learn them?" Qin Mu asked. Astonished, King Kuan said, "So those methods to fix the divine bridge were spread by human emperor? I've already obtained the technique. Truth be told, our Kuan people often come ashore to do business with Eternal Peace Empire, exchanging what we have for what we have not." Qin Mu relaxed upon hearing those words. "I see." Suddenly, a huge rat sprinted onto Sun Ship. Upon nearing them, it transformed into a gray-robed elder. He came to everyone's side and gasped for breath. "There's indeed something underground. I saw empty space with a piece of temporary imperial residence, a god statue that's outrageously large, and a huge knife." Apothecary immediately brought him to soak in the pond of pure yang before saying, "Your injuries have yet to heal, talk slowly." Rat Immortal took in a few more breaths. "There's a passageway underground, and the stone statues have already dug until it. Heading down, there's the Earth's core, which is a piece of vast land. In the center of that space is a god statue that seems to have popped out from the underground. There are chains everywhere, and they are tethered to various palaces. I've no idea how that god statue had gotten itself into the chains, but they are even thicker than the chains pulling the sun behind Sun Ship." Astonished, everyone looked at each other. The chains that held the sun were made in founding emperor period. Such a divine artifact could no longer be forged. Yet the chains beneath God-broken mountain range were actually even thicker than them. Could it be then they were also remnants of founding emperor period? If the chains of sunship are to tie down the sun, could the chains underground be meant to tie down that god statue? Def suddenly said. Everyone's heart trembled. Why would a god statue need to be chained down? Rat Immortal shook his head. No, you guys have guessed it wrong. The chains are connected to the palaces, passing through the underground. While following the digging stone statues, I saw the palaces floating around that god statue. It didn't seem to have been there from the start, but like it had just popped out. It was also quite similar to the god statues in Eternal Peace Empire. It should have shown up along with them, just that it was slightly unlucky and found itself at the bottom of God-broken mountain range. It hit the chains and became unable to push itself to the surface. There will definitely be quite a number of treasures in the palace, so let's go steal. Bah! Let's go pick up some treasure, Cripple suggested with excitement. You have just gotten your life back, so stop running around and be careful of losing your life again. Rat Immortal, what else did you see? Apothecary said with a frown. There's a floating bridge in the air, and it's connected to the palaces around the god statue. There's already chains, so what's the floating bridge for? What do either of them do? King Kuin asked in bewilderment. Rat Immortal's face became weird as he wanted to say something yet did not dare. There was also a huge knife above the god statue's head. The chains were used to chain down that knife. When the god statue tunneled out from the ground, it might have knocked its head on the knife, which resulted in it being sliced. What knife? Apothecary asked in bewilderment. Huge knife. A very huge knife. Rat Immortal revealed 2 long front teeth, and his whiskers twitched. Heaven Knife's knife is already not small, but in front of that knife it's pitifully little. That knife stretches from the north to south and is now embedded in the head of a god statue. It's very, very long. But when I saw that knife, I noticed something weird. He composed himself and said, Granny C. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the gods of high heavens seemed to be in that clear knife. Its blade was like a mirror, and their primordial spirits were battling within it, without finding anything wrong. Qin Mu and the rest carefully imagined that sight and couldn't help shivering even without feeling cold. Granny C and the rest had executed great overarching heavenly stars formation to pull out all the primordial spirits of the gods of high heavens, but they had all landed in the internal space of a knife. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had planned to die with the gods of high heavens, but the power of Earthquake Cauldron had been absorbed by a terrifying energy from underground. Could it be the doing of that knife as well? King Kuin looked at him with a blank face. We had landed in a strange space that was boundless and completely empty, but I would have never thought that it might be inside the blade of a knife. We had battled for so long, but we actually didn't notice anything. He was in slight disbelief. Rat Immortal then added, The stone statues had reached there a step ahead of me, and a few of them seemed to be building a sacrificial altar, a very big one. I've no idea what they are going to use it for. Qin Mu's heart shook slightly and he asked, Could Rat Immortal draw the appearance of that sacrificial altar? Rat Immortal used his vital chi as a brush to draw in the air. After a moment, a sacrificial altar showed up before him. It was similar to the one Qin Mu had seen in front of the hole to the other world, which would be used for the whole devil army to pass through the barriers of the worlds and enter eternal peace. The sacrificial altar Rat Immortal had drawn had similar runes to that sacrificial altar, but there were slight differences. Qin Mu was slightly stunned and his curiosity was aroused. He asked, Who has mirrors? Cripple smiled and said, Def loves to show off his good looks shamelessly, so others might not have, but he surely will. Def snorted and took out a mirror. Qin Mu immediately said, I need 2 mirrors, so who else has one? I have one, Apothecary muttered. Def stared at him. You don't even have a face, so why do you need a mirror? Tidy my clothes, Apothecary said with righteousness. Qin Mu took the 2 mirrors and placed them on the left side of the sacrificial altar that Rat Immortal had drawn and on the right. He then said, Rat Immortal, can you push this sacrificial altar into the mirror? Rat Immortal's heart shook slightly, but the sacrificial altar formed from vital chi flew into the mirror. Qin Mu looked at it and was enlightened. These two sacrificial altars mirror each other. The one those stone statues are constructing mirrors the one in the other world. They should be planning to transfer their devil army directly to the sacrificial altar underground. The sacrificial altar should be a kind of teleportation formation, but it's different from my heavenly saint cult's one. Their teleportation is much more primitive and requires blood sacrifices. Cripple laughed. Why are those fellows trying to send over their army? Are they planning to sacrifice it to wake up the god underground? Nobody laughed along with him, and Cripple soon couldn't continue laughing either. If a devil army came over and sacrificed themselves to awaken the god statue with blood sacrifice, who knew what would happen? That god statue is most likely not a god, but the ancestor of their devil race. The stone statues had run over to save their ancestor, Def said. After sacrificing the army, the god statue would revive. Hee, no matter how hard we fought, it will all be for naught. The sons and grandsons of the god statue will end up reviving him. Everyone was silent. Village chief was dead, old Rulai was dead, old Dao master was dead, and even Shen Xinggu, white immortal, yellow immortal, and the rest were lost. Yet in the end, they still couldn't stop the descent of the true gods and devils. They could no longer fight. After the true devil awakened, they were all going to die. Qin Mu continued to examine the two mirrors, then suddenly said, "Anyone else has a mirror? Give me 2 more." Apothecary flipped through his herb basket and took out 2 more mirrors, throwing them to him. Def raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. Flirty. Qin Mu placed a mirror between the 2 original ones to reflect the light. He then used the 4th one to bounce the light once again. After a number of reflections, the sacrificial altar in the last mirror was a mirror image. Qin Mu thought for a moment and said, "What if the devil army couldn't be transferred? Could the stone statues wake up that god statue underground by themselves? What does little human emperor plan to do?" Apothecary asked curiously. Qin Mu revealed a bashful smile. "Grandpa Apothecary, don't joke with me. I just plan to forge 2 more teleportation sacrificial altars to interfere with their teleportation. After it, the devil army might not be able to come here. It's just like these 2 mirrors. If I adjusted the direction slightly in the middle mirror, the image wouldn't be able to transfer to the last mirror." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 438, The Plaguing of Sins. What Qin Mu cultivated was the teleportation divine art of heavenly devil cult, and it was very different from the blood sacrifices used by the devil gods of the other world. Their blood sacrifice was more primitive and ancient, while the teleportation divine art of heavenly devil cult was built on space algebra. It required extremely high attainments in algebra in order to achieve it. The biggest difference in the 2 kinds of divine arts was that the teleportation divine art of heavenly devil cult knew what it was and the reason why, seeking a solution and reaching it. However, blood sacrifice teleportation knew what it was but did not know the reason why. It did not seek to understand, but to be convenient. This gave Qin Mu and the rest the possibility to interfere with it. "Rat Immortal, bring me and Grandpa Def underground. I need to see the rune layout on their sacrificial altar. Then I will execute teleportation divine art and Grandpa Def will paint it. Divine Flood Dragon King, follow me. I will need your magic power," Qin Mu quickly ordered. "Grandpa Apothecary, you guys shall stay here and guard Granny C and Imperial Preceptor's corporeal bodies." The plan was set, and Rat Immortal immediately brought them out of Sunship. "Don't move. I'll bring you guys underground." After he said that, he shook and transformed into a huge rat. A lump of demon wind swept Qin Mu, Def, and the Divine Flood Dragon King up, pulling them down into the earth. Qin Mu only felt himself traveling quickly through the ground, and not much later, his body suddenly paused. The space in front of his eyes became incomparably vast. When he looked around, he saw the majestic sight that Rat Immortal had described. A huge god statue had risen from the ground and got trapped. Wherever the incomparably thick chains converged, there were palaces holding onto them, and below, there were even more chains wrapped around a long knife stretching from the north to the south. The long knife was incomparably bright and chained down by as if someone was afraid that it would fly away. Its length was too great though, to the point that Qin Mu couldn't imagine who could control it. When the unlucky god statue had risen, it had knocked against the blade, and its incomparably sturdy head was sliced at the heart of its brows. On the raised palm of that god statue, there were over 10 tall and sturdy stone statues hurrying to and fro to construct a huge sacrificial altar. Both they and their project were huge, but when compared to the god statue, they seemed extremely small. Of course, Qin Mu, Deaf, and the rest were even more insignificant. Qin Mu executed 9 heaven's eyes awakening skill to carefully examine the runes on the sacrificial altar and memorized them. Rat Immortal brought him back and forth through the surroundings to observe it from all sides. After some time, he finally memorized all the runes. Rat Immortal enough, Qin Mu muttered irresolutely. Let's go to that palace. I will take a break there to calculate. Rat Immortal brought them to one of the palaces which was connected to a long floating bridge that connected to the cliffs in the distance. It seemed like there had been people living there in the past, looking after the underground space. Qin Mu stepped on firm ground and looked around. He saw that the door to the vermilion red hall was tightly locked. With his divine eyes, he saw an extremely complicated seal which made it hard to enter. Right here then. Qin Mu took out a taotai sack and rummaged through it. He brought out all kinds of calculation tools like Wuji plate, Taiji plate, 5 elements beads, 8 trigrams plate, which made for a dazzling lineup. Even if it was the same old 8 trigrams plate, there were different structures. All the kinds of solid and broken lines could be shifted, so different structures required different tools of calculation, so he took out an extremely large number of them. He used vital qi to lift these tools of calculation up, and instantly countless calculation tools split apart in the air and reassembled themselves. The complication of the calculation made Rat Immortal and Deaf dumbfounded, dazzling their eyes. After a moment, an incomparably complicated tool of calculation that took up a radius of numerous yards appeared in the air. Binary, quaternary, scenary, octal, novenary, decimal, hexadecimal, and base 64. It had countless strange components moving along with his vital qi as crunching sounds rang out non-stop. All kind of calculus beads appeared in the sky and jumped up and down continuously. There were also cubes and cube pillars. They were sometimes long and sometimes short as they constantly progressed forward. Can you understand it? Rat Immortal secretly asked Deaf. Deaf waved his hand. I can't hear you. Rat Immortal didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, Qin Mu shook his taotai sack, and all the tools of calculation flew back inside, vanishing without a trace. The calculation is done. Grandpa Deaf, it's up to you now. Qin Mu roused his spirit and executed his vital qi. Suddenly, a set of teleportation divine art formation appeared in the sky, and all kinds of runes lighted up. Deaf raised his eyes to take a look and painted in the air. The brush moved like a dragon and snake as he quickly laid down the formation. All the rune markings were no different from Qin Mu's teleportation divine art. What he used was the technique of the painting path, and it was none other than the world in the painting technique Qin Mu had once mentioned to him. In the past, his painting path was from inside out. When he drew wind, wind would appear, and when he drew lightning, lightning would appear. But now, his painting was outside in, having a world hidden inside it. Qin Mu dispersed his teleportation divine art and executed his vital qi again. Another kind of teleportation formation then appeared in the air. Deaf painted the second teleportation formation as well. When Rat Immortal looked toward the painting, he couldn't help becoming stumped for words. Deaf had clearly painted on a flat surface, but looking in, he could see the space inside, and there was no difference from the teleportation divine art that Qin Mu had executed. Because of limitations in cultivation, the area covered by the divine art wasn't huge and the power wasn't strong. Yet even though the painting that Deaf drew didn't look huge, Rat Immortal was shocked when he looked inside it. The space in the painting was extremely vast, covering the area with a radius of a mile. Qin Mu executed the teleportation divine art again, and Deaf drew the third painting. After he was done, Qin Mu asked him to paste the third painting under his feet. Deaf was slightly stunned, not understanding the meaning of it. However, he still did it. A beam shot out from Qin Mu's eyes and went for the space above the huge knife. Grandpa Def, place the first painting there. Def flicked his brush, and the first picture flew out, landing where his gaze had fallen. It then gradually vanished without a trace. Qin Mu calculated silently for a moment, and a beam of light shot out from his eyes again, landing at the abdomen of the god statue. The second painting shall be placed there. Def gave a huge stroke, and the second painting flew out without the slightest delay. It then also vanished without a trace. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and smiled. This way, the devil army will be unable to teleport here with the help of the blood sacrifice sacrificial altar. Rat Immortal frowned slightly. It's going to be fine with just this? Qin Mu nodded, but Rat Immortal still wasn't at ease. Are you sure? If the devil army gets teleported and sacrifices themselves for this god statue revive, it will be an unstoppable disaster. Are you sure these two kinds of teleportation divine art of yours will be able to disrupt their blood sacrifice sacrificial altar? Def also wasn't too at ease. He asked with nervousness, Muer, where will these 3 paintings of yours send the devil army? Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before saying, I can't alter their teleportation, just disrupt it. Rat Immortal sighed. Since it's only disruption, doesn't it mean that that army will still be transferred? Qin Mu nodded and explained, teleportation involves a shift in space, which requires very precise algebra calculations. I used 2 kinds of teleportation formations to disrupt the mirror images of the 2 sacrificial altars. Even though the extent of the disruption won't be big, but to an incomparably precise algebra calculation, even an inch of difference can be a difference of 1,000 miles. No mistake can be allowed there. As long as they activate the 2 sacrificial altars, they will. Human Emperor Qin, this is a no-go, Rat Immortal said resolutely. This is a huge matter regarding everyone's survival and destruction. We can't rely on just an inch of difference. I need to find Poison King to poison all the devils that are teleporting over. Follow me out of here. His demon wind swept the 3 people and was about to leave the underground space when an imposing energy crossed time and space and bombarded them from the other world. The space around them warped, and above their heads, the vast stone ceiling warped and distorted, forming a huge whirlpool. Everything in it distorted and gradually turned into a void. Incomparably bright teleportation light shone over from that whirlpool, lighting up the grand sacrificial altar that was on the god statue's palm. That light shone from the deep sky of another world, passing through Def's first painting and landing on the sacrificial altar. On that palm, stone statues stood upright. They half knelt in the surroundings of the sacrificial altar, chanting in resounding and profound devil language as if they were speaking some incantation. At that moment, the second teleportation formation lighted up, and the incomparably bright teleportation light had a slight change. It was so small that it was hard to notice. Suddenly, countless troops of the devils appeared in the teleportation light, and tens of thousands of soldiers hurried over from the other world. It's too late. Rat Immortal felt a chill in his heart. But just as he thought that, an abnormal change happened. In the teleportation light, the bodies of countless soldiers suddenly warped and broke into pieces in the flowing light. All of those people became corpses. The teleportation light pillar became blood red, and countless life forms were screaming in agony within it. But all their actions were completely useless. While Rat Immortal was astonished, Qin Mu said, Divine Flood Dragon King, join me. Rat Immortal immediately looked at Qin Mu and saw him standing in the center of the third painting. The Divine Flood Dragon King attached himself to Qin Mu's back and transformed into a dragon-shaped tattoo. Qin Mu's aura rose exponentially and his face slightly dimmed. Gate of Heaven Influence. A majestic gate appeared behind him, and the teleportation light pillars warped in his direction. The countless soldiers of the devil race passed through the gate one after another. Suddenly, a corpse flew out from the gate and landed beside his feet. It was the corpse of a devil that had transferred over. Its limbs were twisted and his head had become part of his chest. It had to be a mishap which happened during the space teleportation. It had reassembled his body and primordial spirit, but due to the error in calculation, they were in disorder. The corporeal body had died unnaturally, while his primordial spirit was left in Yudu. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, countless corpses poured out from Gate of Heaven influence, and in an instant, there was a corpse mountain around Qin Mu. It piled up higher and higher, filling up the hall. Everyone, please don't blame me. Suddenly, the third painting was activated, and the huge teleportation formation burst forth. Light dazzled the eyes and swept in everything around the palace. Rat, Immortal, and Deaf were teleported out, and their bodies appeared in midair. Before they could land on the ground, numerous broken limbs appeared in the sky alongside them, and a corpse rain fell on great ruins. They raised their heads, and on the other side of the teleportation light, Gate of Heaven influence towered aloft. The eyes of the youth in front of the door were moist as he buried tens of thousands of soldiers from another world. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 439, Heart is Hell. This corpse rain lasted for an hour, and nobody could tell how many corpses had fallen. It was truly a horrifying sight. When the corpse rain stopped, Rat Immortal hurriedly brought Deaf back underground. There, they saw the stone statues standing motionlessly around the sacrificial altar. However, the teleportation light had already extinguished. They looked toward the palace and saw a sapphire blue flood dragon coiling around the roof of it with his head raised up. His long whiskers fluttered in the wind while Qin Mu stood on his head. He was currently looking at the sacrificial altar on the god statue's palm. The two of old men hurriedly passed through a long bridge to reach the palace and ascended to the roof. Deaf looked down and was slightly stunned. Below, even though the stone statues around the sacrificial altar were not moving, they had all raised their heads to look over with their stone eyes. Muer, what happened? Deaf asked nervously. They are looking at me, Qin Mu said softly. Do you think they blame me for killing their clansmen? Deaf shook his head. In their hearts, the army was meant for sacrifice, so even if they hadn't died at your hands, they would have been sacrificed, so you don't have to trouble yourself with that. On the contrary, you stopped them from awakening the god statue, and that's a good thing. It saved the people of Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu looked straight at him. Grandpa Deaf, I have never killed so many people before. Maybe many people had died because of me, but to kill so many of them personally, I'm still a little shaken. When the devil soldiers were teleported, some of them were already dead. There were some that weren't, but after entering Gate of Heaven influence, they were. I counted, and there were over 10,000 people. I have never personally killed so many people before. In Gate of Heaven influence, I saw numerous paper boats floating in the darkness. The messengers of death sat on them to guide the primordial spirits of all the people I had just killed. Deaf was stumped for words and didn't know how to console him. After a moment, he said, When I was still the crown prince of heavenly painting country, I woke up from seclusion to see my country having been wiped out. I walked alone through the palace and saw the streets littered with corpses. Because the resistance was too intense, the invading country, military wolf country, had suffered great losses. To vent his anger, their ruler ordered to massacre the city. He stared blankly ahead, as if he had yet to walk out from the shadow that event had cast. He stayed silent for a moment before continuing. I saw father and mother's heads hanging on the palace doors, saw the corpses of the concubines and elderly ladies. Some soldiers even plucked father's head down to lift it up with spears, showing it off everywhere. I ran onto the street and saw the soldiers of military wolf country pillaging everywhere, beheading anyone they liked and raping the women. I came to my crown prince manor to find my wife and children dead, my daughter trampled by a war horse. He stared with eyes wide open, seeming to have come back to that dark period of time. In the depths of his eyes, the sight of heavenly painting country being destroyed seemed to remain, and it was hell in the mortal world. I was drunk on calligraphy and painting, drunk on the painting path, and didn't care about the country affairs. I tore my ears off then. Since I didn't listen to the affairs of the world, what good were those ears? I used the corpses of the people as brush and the blood that filled the street as paint. I turned that place into hell. The army of military wolf country was dragged into hell. Their army of million people was buried there by me. But so what? My homeland will never return. The dead will not revive. And so I went to hide in great ruins. Def raised his head and looked at Qin Mu. He lifted a finger and tapped him on his heart. Muer, steal your heart and don't be like me, only becoming ruthless after your home is destroyed. By then, it's too late. This is a battlefield, and there's no right or wrong. On the battlefield, your heart is hell. Your heart is Yudu. Qin Mu's head suddenly became clear and he bowed. I've benefited from your advice. Def smiled and said, this sin that plagues you, let Earth Count take care of those people after they die. Our mission is to send more enemies to see him. Qin Mu laughed loudly. Send them to see Earth Count. Rat Immortal looked at the stone statue below and asked, what happened to the stone statues? I don't know. They suddenly stopped moving. Qin Mu was also somewhat puzzled. They're very strong. Because their bodies petrified, they became abnormally hard. Since their sacrifice failed, they will most likely do something again. They won't give up so easily. Suddenly, the stone statues around the sacrificial altar jumped into the abyss below. Qin Mu hurriedly looked down and saw them tunneling into the ground, disappearing from his sight. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. Then Qin Mu moved his gaze to the knife above the god statue's head. It was incomparably bright and seemed like to have sliced the statue's head off without any effort, almost splitting the god statue apart. The surface of the divine knife was incomparably smooth, without any veins to be seen. It was brighter and purer than the brightest mirror in the world. The primordial spirit of Granny C, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Mute, Butcher, and the rest seemed to be on its flat surface, fighting with the gods of high heavens, but unable to see the sight outside. Suddenly, gray fog poured over and filled the entire underground space. The group watched it become denser and denser. Mountains and rivers flooded over in the fog and drowned them out. Not only that, even the god statue which had popped out from underground and the bright long knife was drowned out as well. Only the chains were faintly discernible. After a moment, the fog stopped flowing in, and white bone mountains appeared. They were incomparably majestic, and the underground space filled with the white bones crawling all over them. It looked sinister and terrifying. The living realm of the dead. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he looked into the depths of the fog. At the deepest part of the fog, there was a dock which was the only path into the living realm of the dead. It and Fengdu had come to the underground of God-broken mountain range, overlapping with the strange underground space. Who has Fengdu coins? Qin Mu asked in a hurry. Rat Immortal and Def had never seen this sight before and shook their heads. The divine Flood Dragon King was a god of high heavens, so he naturally wouldn't have Fengdu coins either. At this moment, a tattered ship sailed over through the sea of fog, and Qin Mu raised his hand to wave while shouting, Boatman, can you give us a lift? The oar creaked as the boat sailed over from the skeleton mountains. Qin Mu was beyond excited while Rat Immortal and Def looked as though they were going to face a great enemy as they stared nervously at the tattered boat. After a moment, it came to the front of the palace and floated in front of the divine Flood Dragon King's huge head, looking to be very small. The boatman wore a woven rush raincoat and a bamboo hat which covered his face. The divine Flood Dragon King hung his head down and Qin Mu was about to jump into the boat when a white bony palm stretched out from under the woven rush raincoat. A sinister voice came from under the bamboo hat. Little friend, do you have money? Qin Mu shook his head. The treasured boat doesn't ferry guests with no money, the boatman said. I'm just doing a small business. When you have the money, it won't be late for you to enter Fengdu. Qin Mu was disappointed. Suddenly, he saw that the white bony palm only had 4 fingers. One of its fingers had been chopped off, and it was most likely a sword wound. His body trembled violently as he followed the boatman leaving into the distance with his eyes until he vanished into the depths of the sea of fog. When did Fengdu change their boatman? Qin Mu asked in a shout. A sinister voice came from the sea of fog, but what was weird was it actually held a hint of happiness. The day I died, it changed the boatman. Have you seen Heavenly Devil Patriarch? Hee hee. When you have the money, Why don't you come over to take a look? Qin Mu stared blankly into the distance. Rat Immortal was beyond bewildered and asked, Human Emperor Qin, you recognize that ghost? Qin Mu nodded. He seems to be an old friend which only had 9 fingers. That missing one had been chopped off by village chief. You're saying he's Ling Jing? Rat Immortal instantly came to realization, becoming delighted and surprised. He also shouted loudly, Senior Brother Ling Jing, do you still remember me? No reply came from the sea of fog. Rat Immortal called out a few more times, but there was no reply. It left him disappointed and frustrated. Suddenly, the fog moved once more and flowed away to the west where it quickly vanished without a trace. Qin Mu raised his head and saw that the divine blade was still on the head of the god statue. It was still incomparably bright, but there was no Granny Sea and the rest within it. Granny Sea and the rest were snatched away by Fengdu? Qin Mu was astonished, but he immediately rushed out of the earth's surface with Rat Immortal and Deaf. Suddenly, the bright light shone into their eyes, stinging them. The sun was rising in the east, and its first rays had shone onto their faces. Behind them, the darkness of great ruins was rapidly retreating. That's where the corpses of over 10,000 soldiers fell. Deaf pointed to some place in great ruins and said to Qin Mu, You teleported them 100 miles or so. Qin Mu activated Fire Heaven's eyes to look over and saw a mountain of white bones. The 10,000 or so soldiers of the devil race only had their bones left. Both their flesh and blood were gone, having already been swallowed by the monsters of great ruins. The white bone mountain was also shined on by sunlight and looked very strange. Qin Mu turned around and walked toward Sun Ship. My heart is hell. Who cares about the overflowing sins? Deaf smiled and walked after him. Near Sun Ship, the sky full of stars formed by great overarching heavenly stars was starting to rapidly dim. The woman who had laid it out her eyes and fell from midair. Qin Mu immediately increased his speed, planning to catch that woman. Another person fell from the air while crying out in a weak voice, ABA, ABA. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment, his arms going left and right. But at that moment, Blind also began falling down head first, so Qin Mu rushed toward him in a hurry. Muer, are you going to see me and old Ma fall to our deaths? Butcher asked loudly. Qin Mu looked over and saw the 2 grandpas also falling from the sky. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He really didn't know who to catch. As for Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Queen Yi, who was falling down as well, Qin Mu didn't have any plans to catch them. Hu Linger rushed out from Sun Ship and shouted, Maha! 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 A bunch of flood dragons rushed out from her side like wind and caught everyone who was falling down. Qin Mu finally let out a sigh of relief and wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Thump! In the distance, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor crashed on the ground, and Qin Mu jumped in shock. He hurriedly looked at the flood dragon who was supposed to catch him and couldn't help becoming stunned. That flood dragon was carrying Earthquake Cauldron and crying out Maha Maha while happily running back to Sun Ship with the other flood dragons. It had absolutely no idea that it had caught the wrong thing. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 440, Flower Blooming from Void. In Eternal Peace Capital City, Qin Mu was examining the true god stone statue which had tunneled out from underground. 3 months had passed since the crisis of high heavens. During that time, everyone who had been injured had undergone treatment. With Apothecary taking care of them personally, everyone recovered pretty fast. Hermit Qing Yu returned to Little Jade Capital, but he would come back from time to visit everyone. Rat Immortal and Fox Immortal brought Willow Immortal, Yellow Immortal, and White Immortal's ashes back to Willow Prefecture. King Kuan and Queen Yi brought Xianxia tortoiseshell to the Black Tortoise people overseas, sending him back to his clan. Elder of Discipline also brought over young patriarch's ashes, burying them under the sacred tree. Qin Mu had personally sent old Dao Master's corpse to Dao Sect, while old Ma welcomed old Rulai's corporeal body back to Great Thunderclap Monastery, inviting him into 10,000 Buddha's pagoda. Tuxing Feng was also among the casualties, but he had buried himself and his opponent deep in the magma underground. Hermit Qin Mu took a trip underground and saw a woman that was almost as tall as Tuxing Feng and who was his widow. She paid her respects at where Tuxing Feng had died in battle and said to Qin Mu, "Earth travelers will never go back on the promise made back then. When human emperor summons us again, there will still be men to come and join you." After the battle, God-broken mountain range had vanished and the darkness had invaded Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu went to check on the flag he had stabbed into the ground and saw that the darkness was not spreading. That made him more or less at ease. As for the huge hole that was blown in God-broken mountain range by Earthquake Cauldron, it had still not vanished. The situation in the other world could still be seen. The devils in that world were busy preparing something once more. The stone statues moving around the ruins of God-broken mountain range would show up from time to time, and there were devils frequently popping out from somewhere. Imperial Preceptor had ordered the college scholars of all lands to go there for experience. They were to get rid of the scattered devils that popped out, which resulted in many adventurers there every day. The devils from the other world found it very hard to regain their power. Everything in Eternal Peace Empire returned back to normal, and the commotion caused by the stone statues and abnormal treasures slowly died down. However, the huge and majestic true God statues still stood upright like mountains. They didn't vanish. The stone statue in front of Qin Mu was one of them. It stood tall and upright, overlooking the capital city in front of it. The stone statue was so tall that even if it couldn't move, it still attracted many foolish people to pay respect to it and offer incense. Qin Mu raised his head to examine it. His thoughts were like the clouds in the sky, gathering and dispersing. "You know it. These stone statues will revive and destroy the world sooner or later," said Su Xianxia, and Qin Mu turned around. He saw the youth who was about his age carrying his luggage. Jing Yan followed beside him, and she also carried a tiny bag. Su Xianxia came to his side and examined the stone statue. The natural disaster did not come and the fate of humankind will continue. There will still be war. Even if you prevented high heavens from doing their task, there will still be numerous people dying every day, and they will be used as sacrifices by the god statues. One day, they will accumulate enough power to awaken, destroying this world. Qin Mu continued to examine the stone statue with a calm expression. "I know, Imperial Preceptor knows, and Village Chief also knew it, but we had no choice but to do that. The longer we drag this out, the stronger eternal peace will become. In the past, we didn't have the power to fight back, so it was easy for them to crush us, but given enough time, we can grow until the difference between us won't be so vast." Village Chief felt this way, and Imperial Preceptor felt that way too. He looked toward Su Xianxia and revealed a pure smile. "As long as we live, there's hope, isn't there?" His smile was very infectious, and Su Xianxia couldn't help smiling as well. Jing Yan felt a weird feeling rising in her heart. Su Xianxia was an abnormally serious person and rarely smiled, yet every time he met Qin Mu he would be infected by him. Heavenly Devil Cult Master really possessed abnormal magic. Su Xianxia took out a bag of money and smiled. "I've come here to pay back the debt and also to take my leave. This is the money I owe you. As I return it to you, I'm also saying my farewell." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He took the money bag and said, "Brother Su earns money pretty fast, eh?" Su Xianxia smiled. "I had taken a big job. The spirit weapons I forged gained some reputation, so when the Emperor summoned all the able craftsmen in the world to restore mysterious pearl crossbows, I had gone as well. At that time, only I was able to restore it and offer a blueprint to the army. Thus the Emperor rewarded me with a big sum of money." "When do you plan to go?" Qin Mu asked. Su Xianxia tightened the strap of his luggage and walked away with Jing Yan toward the dock. "I came to Eternal Peace to kill you. After that, I was supposed to return to high heavens to continue cultivating in silence. However, after meeting you, I felt that journeying through eternal peace was a better training for my frame of mind." Qin Mu followed him. The dock was very far, and the two of them were starting to walk differently. They were contesting in secret again. "After improving my Tao heart, I have obtained numerous comprehensions I have never thought possible before. However, my training has ended. It's time for me to leave eternal peace." Su Xianxia raised his head to look at the sky and said, There are still many unsolved mysteries in my heart waiting for my attention. I need to find the answers to those mysteries. The gods of high heavens have practically all died, so why aren't you returning to high heavens? Now that there's no leader, you should go back to take charge of the general situation. I'm not going back, Su Xianxia said. High heavens is known under such a name, but it's merely a void. The people there can't make their own decisions and can't lead their own lives. They are just the dogs of true gods. As a flower blooming from the void, I need to find my own path. Brother Qin, my training in eternal peace has ended, and I want to go to great ruins to find the answers to the secrets that still elude me. What about your training? Qin Mu was stunned, but he suddenly smiled. My training has just begun. They walked more and more weirdly and stumbled all the way to the dock. When they reached it, the two of them smacked their palms out and the waves in the river suddenly overflowed into the sky. Wind rose and clouds surged as lightning crisscrossed in the surroundings. Qin Mu laughed loudly and grabbed the other's palm tightly. Their shoulders collided. The two of them let go, and Su Xianxia brought Jing Yan aboard the ship. He turned his head back and smiled. I've lost to you the previous time, and it's going to stay with me all the time. When I return, let's see who is the Alpha and Beta Overlord bodies. Qin Mu smiled. You are definitely the Beta and I'm the Alpha. Su Xianxia laughed loudly and waved his hand before leading Jing Yan into the hold of the ship. Qin Mu raised his head as the flying ship gradually rose, bringing them far away and vanishing into the clouds. The radiant sun was dazzling and Qin Mu looked away, his gaze returning to the stone statue that overlooked the capital. There were numerous foolish people offering incense and prayers to it, hoping that it would bless them. No one knew the deeds of the benevolent. They were nameless. Village chief, Tuxing Feng, and the rest had died to save these people, yet no one knew and no one offered them incense and prayers. On the other hand, the stone statues which had come to destroy the world were surrounded by incenses. How ironic. Su Xianxia was right. The people of Eternal Peace Empire will be born, will grow old, will get sick, and will die. They will all become sacrifices to the stone statues and allow the true gods to accumulate power until they can revive themselves. Qin Mu walked toward the capital. The fierce fight over God-broken mountain range and the lives of numerous strong practitioners were merely just to drag out the time. Sooner or later, the stone statues would awaken from the sacrifices of the foolish people and use their power to wipe out the whole mortal realm. What I need to do is to make Imperial Preceptor's reform become even more spread. The fire has to burn even more fiercely in the hot oil. We shall await the day these stone statues awaken. It was time for Imperial College to choose Imperial scholars again. The selection was very great in scale. Tens of thousands scholars from the whole world had hurried to the capital. The Emperor and Imperial Preceptor had personally come to Imperial College. There was also Taoist Lin Xian of Tao Sect, Rulai Ma of Great Thunderclap Monastery, Hermit Qing Yu of Little Jade Capital, and Qin Mu as Heavenly Devil Cult Master as well. Emperor Yanfeng saw that there were too many scholars flooding into Imperial College and suggested to open other academies to split the responsibility of Imperial College. He founded River Tomb Academy, Surging River Academy, Li River Academy, and Heavenly Saint Academy. The scholars from all lands could take examinations for the 4 big academies. They choose their people to learn paths, skills, and divine arts, and those who succeeded in their studies would later be able to enter the imperial court or become officials. Heavenly Devil Cult had taken the name Heavenly Saint Academy, and as the cult master, Qin Mu became the first Grand Chancellor, which promoted him to the 4th rank. For such a matter, Qin Mu worked hard for a time to set Heavenly Saint Academy at the manor where Granny C lived. Only when it was scorching summertime was Heavenly Saint Academy prepared. All kinds of educational establishments were built and talents from all over the land attracted. The disciples of Heavenly Devil Cult School Hall became the first batch of Heavenly Saint scholars. Qin Mu also invited Xiongxiu and Yu Zhaoqing to come and teach. He also asked Tao Master Lin Xian, Rulai Ma, Hermit Qingyu, and Fox Immortal to come to hold lectures from time to time, which made Heavenly Saint Academy truly extraordinary. On that day, Imperial Preceptor came to visit and asked, Grand Chancellor's Heavenly Saint Academy is pretty bustling and energetic. Qin Mu smiled. Heavenly King doesn't visit me without a cause. So what are you here for this time? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor paused for a moment before saying, I'm preparing to wipe out high heavens, but I need to scout the roads of West Earth first. I need a person who is familiar with West Earth. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, but he soon called xianxia. Does Palace Master want to reclaim true Heaven Palace of West Earth? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor went straight to the point. xianxia was surprised and delighted. True Heaven Palace has been seized by traitors, so does Imperial Preceptor have confidence in assisting me in snatching it back? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded and said, I want to take a trip to High Heavens to prevent future troubles. High Heavens is in West Earth, so I can help you reclaim true Heaven Palace on the way. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly as he looked towards xianxia. She gritted her teeth and said, After Eternal Peace raises the snow plains and the prairie, he will launch his army on West Earth sooner or later. For there to be fewer wars, I'm willing to submit to Eternal Peace. In that case, Palace Master can go prepare. We will set off in the next few days. Does Cult Master want to go? We'll be going to West Earth not for war, but to scout the way, and Cult Master can help. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment as xianxia looked at him pleadingly. He then smiled and said, It's good to go to West Earth as well. I have a promise with Poisoner Mu Ingxue, who had asked me to find her. However, before that, I need to summon some souls in great ruins. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was slightly stunned, then nodded. In that case, Palace Master and I will set off first. If you meet that person, thank him for me and do pay half of the respect owed a master. Qin Mu nodded.